on, you bastard!
Review copies in parts provided by Blokees. With that said, all opinions contained within are my own and not influenced by external factors. The licensed third-party space is an incredibly difficult niche to get into, at least when it comes to the Transformers franchise. With other franchises, all you really gotta do is plonk some form of stylization on it and call it a day. But Transformers collectors, we're kinda spoiled. Especially in the current era, we're being hit with banger after banger after banger, and it's leaving a lot of people significantly pickier about what they buy. Licensed third-party often doesn't have the hindsight and knowledge on what makes a Transformer good. And even if, by some miracle, they manage to scale that wall, who's to say the fandom will gravitate towards those releases? I remember a certain company attending the Australian Transformers 1 event, and I won't mention which company it was, but not a single person really paid attention to the stall. An entire room full of fans, and nobody gave a shit. Not all third-party releases strike a chord with the fandom, licensed or no. So, why has Blokees succeeded where others have not? These things have taken the off. Bit by bit, they're crawling into every space of the community, including the hearts of those that collect them. Why is that? Why are they so popular? What's making everyone go bananas over them? Originally, I was just going to make another sponsored sample video. It's what I set out to do with all the companies I work with. However, sometimes I have more to say than I initially thought. Sometimes I think the context behind a certain release is far more interesting. But unlike the last case of this, it's for a much more positive reason this time. I'm so sorry, Cybertronians. I've caught the Blokees bug. So today's diagnosis pertains to my journey across the first few sets I've come across. Maybe in examining these, we can find out why these have succeeded where others have failed. Or maybe it'll just warm up something in my cold, dead heart. If you've been active in the fandom this past year, no doubt you've come across people going nuts over these, perhaps to an exhausting degree. I know some people have had enough hearing about them constantly, but that tends to happen when the community goes bonkers over a new thing. If, however, this is the only channel you interact with in terms of Transformers content, first, thank you. And second, Blokees are small-scale non-transforming figures that exist somewhere in a middle ground between Gunpla and Bionicle. In essence, they're model kits, but they're far less fiddly than you'd be used to. If you've ever played around with 30-minute missions, they're kinda close to that. But even then, they're a lot simpler, at least in terms of the standard randomized Blokees packs. The more complex kits are pretty much in line though. The simplicity here is so easy that you don't really need clippers. Unlike most kits, though for the larger kits I'd still recommend using some. Normal figures usually retail from about 10 to 15 Aussie dollary dues, so some stores appear to be jacking up the price for some bizarre reason. I actually planned on covering them in the upcoming marathon, but unfortunately I ran into a rather annoying kerfuffle, where halfway through the recording, the audio cut out. I was going to record the second half, but ultimately I gave up and just swapped it out with another video instead. Especially as they reached out to me for this project anyway. Now, the big thing with these is that they are randomized. You never particularly know what you're going to get in a specific box. It could be Prime, it could be Shockwave, it could be the singing voice worse than Johnny down at the pub on a Thursday night, or it could be Beast Wars Retracts. It's not Beast Wars Retracts. But it would be nice if it was Beast Wars Retracts. The best way to describe it is similar to the collectible series LEGO minifigures. You don't know exactly which one you'll receive, especially since they got rid of the plastic baggies. But if you want a specific one, the market is very much open to you. There is one key difference in release strategy, however. If you do want a specific one, you can easily buy the whole set and sell off the figures you don't want. This is a fantastic idea for figure accessibility. It guarantees you're not missing out and getting duplicates, and I love it. And hey, Transformers fans are used to buying multi-packs and selling off the figures they don't want, unless Toy Hacks makes a set that fixes the figure they dislike. Now, unfortunately, this method does mean you're out of the running for the specific chase figure, but I'm sure that's an okay sacrifice for most. Oh, right, explanation. A chase figure is a super rare figure that's short packed to oblivion. The Japanese G1 Micromasters were filled with these sort of things, and it usually involves a metallic version of an existing design. When you buy the complete set, you're not really in the running to do so, which is a bit unfortunate, but hey, at least it's just a metallic version of a figure you can already get. It's not like those damn Hot Wheels cars that had no reason to be short-packed other than artificial scarcity or, heaven forbid, Mr. Gold. I was never able to get Mr. Gold as a kid. Still mad. Hey, DrLockdown from the future here. Reception actually chimed in on the pre-release version and corrected me. You can actually get the chase version when you buy it as a set. Apparently this is what happened to Fuse, so I guess I was wrong on that. After unpacking these things, most of the bits are already disassembled off the sprues. This is, of course, where the Bionicle comparisons come in. From here, it's just a simple matter of assembly. Still, I wish I had a proper step-by-step showcase on how the process works, going in depth and covering all the nuances. hey, wait a minute.
First thing you want to do is find the feet. They're exactly the same. They're identical, not mirrored. So you can use whatever you want. Just put them down to the side here. Next up, you want to take these pieces, which are the backs of the legs. And then you take these pieces, which are the ball joints, which again are also identical across all of them. And you plug it into the bottom of the foot like so. It has a nice click. What you want to do again is take the front piece, and sometimes the printing is different, so take a closer look at that. Since I'm going to be doing the right leg first, I'll do that over there. It has highway, and the other one will be patrol. Clip those together. Clip him into the feet. And same with the other leg. If you really want to keep them out of the way so that they're easier to keep track of, you can also place them on the stand. It's a nice little thing to do. It helps you get a bit more leverage on them too. There are two identical sprues, which become the shoulder assemblies, the elbows, and the knees. And the elbows and knees are both identical as well, so really you can just use whatever. The model kit builder in me is telling me to use proper clippers for this, but they are quite loose, so you can sort of just push them out. And for the purpose of this video, just to keep things a bit simple, I'm going to do that. Plus, if you happen to be building these in like a shopping center or something because you just bought them, you can also do that. Though, don't build these in a shopping center. It's sort of a disaster waiting to happen. With lost pieces and all that. And here you take the two pieces and you peg them together, and that is what you got there. And it doesn't really matter which side you clip them into, it's all basically the same. You just kind of peg it in there we go. And of course, second verse same as the first. If you want to do all of these back to back and then just have them lying around to assemble, you can also do that too. Good news, the thigh pieces are completely identical. Again, they are not mirrored. So it doesn't matter which order you put them in, they both work either way. Waist joint, it is symmetrical, so again, it does not matter which way you put it. Now, the waist armors do get a bit different. Some of them are different from front to back, like Prowl's here, but some of them are also identical, so it really depends on which one you're getting. With this one, it's the same piece, but one has printing, one doesn't, so that's pretty self-explanatory. Also is pretty self-explanatory, just pegs in, you pull the shoulder pieces out, and peg them into either shoulder, whichever one you feel like. The front and the back pieces are pretty self-explanatory, you just kind of know what they already are. One thing that you do have to do is make sure the shoulders are lined up correctly, because they got those two pegs there that'll actually line up with the way the backpack and the chest plate work. So that when you click everything together, it should all go nice and solidly, and these ones should only get a little bit of motion instead of way too much. The shoulder pieces are identical though, so you can just pop them on however you like. Shoulder armor is sculpted identically, but the front parts are printed differently, so that's something to keep an eye on. Yours may be completely identical though, so just keep an eye on it. We'll need the joints to be made as well now for the elbows. Now, the arms are actually the one part that you do need to keep an eye on. They're the same across most figures, but you'll notice these ports on the outsides. They're actually for the accessories that they come with. So what you need to do is make sure when you go to peg it in, make sure that the hole is on the outside. That way you can ensure the full functionality of the accessories. Not the accessories are that crazy, but it's a thing that works a bit better. This sprue is for the hands. You can use whichever hand you feel like. I'm just going to use the fists because they're nice and simple. And this one will depend on the figure you get, but you'll notice there's parts on the back for different backpack pieces. In the case of Prowl, you've got door wings, that just peg on the backpack like so, opposable cannons, like so on the top on the ball joints. Come on, get in there. Ah, that is way tighter than it should be. Last but not least, everything should be very self-explanatory. You take the last ball joint and peg it into the top there, take the face sculpt and peg it in the top there. Yeah, that is very creepy. And you take the helmet and it should just get on the top there. Bit squishy until it clicks into place. There we go. And you can just remove the accessories and everything else you might have. Ooh, spare ball joints. Don't know why that's there.
In fully assembled form, Blokees exist in this weird grey area between properly proportioned and super deformed. For those who have not heard the word, it's an umbrella term for what many call chibi. As the Blokees style doesn't go that far, it's not enough to seem like a Nendoroid of sorts, though at the same time it doesn't quite exist in the realm of standard Transformers design. It's definitely a deliberate stylization choice, and in many instances, that can cause issues. Time and time again on this channel, I've decried the dreaded third-party syndrome, where companies only stylize for the sake of stylization, without much of a clear point. It's not an uncommon thing, both in the realms of licensed and unlicensed Transformer-like figures. I'm happy to report here, however, that the stylization very much does have a point, and it works very well. They've balanced it precisely so that it mixes both the cool and the cute. For as adorable as super deformed Transformers are, they're sort of an acquired taste. They're incredibly popular in Asian markets, but the wider audience can occasionally find them abominations against all that is sacred. As such, it's smart to pull back and not go all in on the cute aesthetic. aesthetic. Years ago, I remember this sort of middle ground being referred to as paraform, but looking it up again reveals no such results. Could be my memory being fucky-wucky, but honestly, it's hard to tell. Whatever the case, the aesthetic is calculated, and that's worked incredibly effectively as the first step in achieving fandom darling status. Of course, there are other elements that allow them to succeed within the fandom, but I feel we'll have to take a closer look at the individual figures to see what makes them tick. Without further ado,
here comes the boy.
When this wave first hit the shelves, I was sorta just buying them as extras whenever I saw them. The lineup was fairly standard, all things considered. Just a simple mugshot gallery of G1 figures, and a safe handful of bets that everyone knows and tolerates. I guess Optimus Prime is a good example of figures to lay the groundwork for everyone else, in more ways than one. One thing a lot of third-party figures struggle with is consistency in aesthetic, particularly derivative of their insistence on stylization for the sake of stylization. Not all of them fall into these trappings, but it is a smidge common. Blokees has managed to overcome this hurdle quite effectively. There's mixes of sharp angles and more rounded edges, but it's a careful balance, not a slapdash, who gives a shit case. The legs taper off to the bottom, much like the Toon design, but they're squished to fit into the semi-chibi style. The torso juts out a little bit, but not to an extreme level. The arms are a lot smaller than the legs, which gives the whole thing a downward swept vibe. And you know me, I love when figures do this. It's also surprisingly well painted for the price. There's a lot of small details on show, which puts most core class figures around the same price bracket to shame. And sure, part of that comes from assembly cost savings and no need for specialized engineering. But there's also a really interesting way they do things. Most of the details aren't actually paint, but instead tampografts. There is paint on the body, but it's only in really small specific places. The rest is all done with tampographing, even parts you'd think would be easier to do in paint. Honestly, I think this is really clever. It allows them to cover a lot of smaller details that they normally wouldn't. It also means they can reuse a lot of parts later on, but we'll save that for, ironically, later on. The head sculpt is surprisingly good. This is one part that can be really difficult to get right amongst third-party releases. Hell, even some official ones up a smidge. And sure, not every release does this well, but Prime does it rather nicely at least. Again, it's a bit more angular than you'd normally get, but it works for the overall aesthetic. Overall, it's just a nice simple Optimus Prime. It's got the cute, it's got the intensity, it's got the compactness, and it's got the expressiveness. Articulation is pretty good for the size. Anything you could reasonably expect from a model kit like this is present and accounted for, short of an ab crunch. Of course, a lot of this does come down to the fact it is a model kit, and those things can basically be as articulated as you could conceivably want. Just put extra cuts in the joints and you're basically good to go. Right, Lego? Right, Lego? I don't usually tend to go for non-transforming figures, simply because I just don't see much of a point in them. Why engage with that when at the same price point you can get a fully functioning figure with a whole extra mode, probably better realized aesthetics, and most likely the same level of articulation? I think since messing around with this, I've come to realize what they've been missing. An experience unique to their niche. Blokees inhabit a style that just doesn't work within the confines of traditional engineering. These recognize that they don't transform and lean into it. Sure, I've covered products that do the same on this channel before, but not in this carefully calculated way. And it's not just a Mo accuracy thing either. Mainline is plenty accurate, and just making it even more so doesn't necessarily do anything for me. They inhabit their own space, and they do so incredibly well. Of course, uniqueness aside, how are they able to remain in the sub $15 price brackets? While there are plenty of savings to be made from the lack of assembly costs and the careful calculations of using tampographs instead of paints, that doesn't account for other factors like the licensing fees. I mean, other companies make figures roughly the same size and charge commander price for 2 of them and a piece of cardboard backing. Well, the answer to that is retool power. If you actually look between the various figures that released in the first wave, or at the lineup in general, a lot of the same parts are shared between figures. Every Blockee, is the singular Blockee or something else, features the same feet, the same thighs, the same waist assembly, the same waist armor, the same inner torso, the same shoulder assembly pieces, the same forearms. The only differences are the colors and tampographs. And that's ignoring the internal skeletal pieces, which obviously wouldn't make any sense to change. And then you see everything else in this wave, and you realize that the similarities go even deeper than that. These are the lads I got out of this assortment, and all of them go even further with identical shoulder pieces. Then, in the case of the Datsuns, you also get identical torso and backpack parts. And then Jazz takes that even further, though obviously he has different shoulder accessories and the addition of extra wheel arches on the legs. This is really really smart. Reusing the same parts over and over again allows them to keep the cost down without having to worry about ruining individuality. With different tampergraphs, they all end up feeling vastly different, even if structurally they really aren't. It also allows you to go either toon or toy style with jazz on the door wings, which I think is a really neat unintended side effect. Side note, the tampergraphs on the doors are especially lovely, in all the cases across both waves. Of course, reusing bits means they all get the same accessories. Each figure comes with open and closed handsets, though I've never really bothered with the open ones. Outside of a poor attempt at a JoJo pose, they've never done much for me. They also come with faction symbols that you can plonk on the sides, which is why they have the holes here. They're sort of interchangeable, so any can fit in any way. Other than that, they all come with different guns and sometimes blast effects. They get the job done, nothing too crazy here. Other than that, what can I say? They're done really well. So, what's there to complain about? Well, couple of things. I've especially noticed with the first waves that the unmasked faces look off. Prime and Jazz get away with it, but something about the squinted eye and Skylar white yo face combo just doesn't really work on the others. Maybe bigger helmets could have rectified it, but they're not the worst third-party face sculpts I've ever come across. Worse though is the choice of some of the hardware. 3 of the inner ball joints on each and every one of them are cast in clear plastic. Clear plastic load-bearing joints are never a good idea, and so far I still haven't seen them move away from these. Still though, far from a deal breaker. They're all nice little core-scaled figures hovering around the same price bracket, so forgive me if I don't give you the dimensions for each figure I'm talking about. Either way, through all the factors I've listed here, they had me hooked. As such, there was no way the journey was gonna stop there. Unfortunately, I never really got to see Wave 2 hit Aussie shelves, but if I ever feel so inclined, I can go back and scour eBay for the ones I've missed.
Literally the day I finished filming this review, they were just there, at King's Comics.
Definitely jumped the fuck on Wave 3 though, and I'm so happy I did. Wasn't able to get many before they flew off the shelves, but what I got really does shake things up a bit. Armorless Magnusless weirdly fits in a way I wasn't expecting. Often doing figures entirely in a single color can be quite dull, but this really makes it work with the coloration used. The extra paint on the leg vents break things up just enough, and I adore the turquoise splotched around everywhere. And those windows, damn, they are just something else. I don't know what this new head layout is doing, but god, the turquoise mouthpiece looks great. And I also adore the way the axe turned out, making full use of the tampergraphic techniques. Functionally, it's not that much different from Optimus Prime outside of the different accessories, but it just gives it a whole new vibe. Maybe it's because I'm so over G1 Optimus Primes, especially in the face of some of the best we've had in ages. But this weirdly seems more up my alley. It's simple, but very effective. Nothing simple about Soundwave, however. This goes insanely hard. There are tampergraphs everywhere, and a bunch of specialized pieces to help facilitate them. The legs especially, with all their layering and downward swept motion. This is how I like my Soundwaves, and this is right up my alley. The only part I'm not so certain on is the way the torso functions. Having the printer cassette there feels a little off, especially as it opens to reveal another cassette on the inside, one that's died a horrible death. But other than that, and other than the lack of paint on the Gatling gun, because heaven forbid it ever be as illing as Dreadwing, it's a pretty good release. It does have a bit of overlap with the Iron Factory version, so I don't hold as much affinity for it as I probably should, but it's done insanely well. I'll tell you what does curry my affinity though. Bone Crusher. This thing looks absolutely mental, using so many unique parts to pull it off. It feels like its own specially sculpted release, taking what came before but building on it to a ridiculous level. They finally managed to fix the face sculpt on the unmasked bots too, which is fantastic. I adore the way they've done the tread legs. Since they don't have to transform, they can really do whatever the they want. This trapezoidal system really fits into the Blokees stylings, melding perfectly with the existing calves. And to avoid the whole thing of becoming an endless waft of green, which unfortunately seems to be the fate of the Studio Series version, they've even done the internal frame pieces in purple. Still using those clear feet balls though, which is a bit of a shame. I will say, I do find it funny that they allow the front scoop to fold down, revealing specialized detail that wasn't visible before. Like, okay, cool, but why? Makes me wonder if there's a way to disassemble them and combine the whole thing into a giant Devastator. No matter how much I search, I can't seem to find any evidence of such outside of fan combinations. For real though, a Blokees Devastator would go hard. You can see from this way that they're starting to become a lot more experimental with their new pieces and techniques. They're still the same old Blokees at their core, but they take more risks, do more specified things with each outing. One thing I'll always appreciate companies doing is avoiding stagnation, trying to move forward and improve in any way they can. And that would continue even further with the next wave. This was where Blokees basically stepped in and offered me the entire wave as a sponsored sample. I would have said yes regardless, but at this point I already had the Blokees bug and had already sold my soul for the eventual Blokees. Honk. I'm not an egg, I swear. The Constructicons continue to be great, giving us both Hook and Scrapper. All of the awesome specialized molding comes back, with even better tamper graphing to pick out the lovely details. If these actually transformed, they'd probably be my favorite Constructicons ever. I think I might hunt down the rest anyway if it doesn't end up being too difficult. I especially love the dedicated leg detailing. They're crafted carefully and work really well at creating the illusion of depth. Blokees has realized they can go ham on the tamper graphing without causing too many issues with the budgets. Probably because these things are way more popular than that one time I made a meme in 2 seconds. Why is this the most watched video on my channel of all time? Why can't it be one of these instead? The face sculpts continue to go hard, especially Scrapper. Although they've since solved the issues with the wonky sculpts, masked heads still go harder. How to make the rules, they just do. I also love how the midriffs push through the sculpted torso detailing. They're not something you'd normally notice, but they make good use of the standardized frame. I don't know, it's nice to see a stylized take on the Constructicons that move away from the G1 design while still doing it competently. Or at least competently and not produced by the spawn of Satan. Really, I just wish they'd carried over the purple joints from Bone Crusher. I know they're not as necessary on these two as they're not comprised entirely of green, but it would be a nice addition. Of course, not everything within the wave was a complete overhaul. Straight redecos keep the cost of the whole wave down, and with this we have Bluestreak and Nemesis Prime. I don't have a lot to say about Bluestreak other than the tamper graphing still being awesome and the face still staring into the abyss within your soul. But Nemesis Prime... okay, as a figure on his own, not much to him. I appreciate that they upped the turquoise level, as that's usually how I like my Nemes. And the window tamper graphing is still really good. But honestly, the accessories are my favorites. They echo a lot of that Power of the Prime style, which themselves were a throwback to the original Armada Prime. Here, however, they're massive compared to everything else. I don't know if they specifically fit the vibe of the figure itself, but hot damn, they look good. Also nice that they finally make use of the armholes instead of the dinky old badges minus the mushroom, because I don't do drugs. But yeah, between the turquoise and the weapons, this is probably my favorite of the 3 Primalikes. It's honestly refreshing to see a company go for the 3 easy releases, yet make them all unique and distinct. They don't feel like the same experience, they all offer something different. I like it. I like it a lot. Not so sure I'm sold on Shockwave though. Surprisingly, he has some decent new tooling with new shoulders, new shins, a new head, and all the other stuff you'd expect like the torso, backpack head, etc. I don't think it really works though. The shoulders feel way out of place when compared to everything else. They just look way too thin for the design. The shins work, but the head sculpt kinda doesn't. The ear spikes jut so far out, feeling like they're trying to go for the Fans Project Crossfire style, where it's extra elongated, but with how far out the ears are, I don't think it succeeds. And I'm sorry, the torso just looks cheap. Honestly feels like a sticker slapped on, which falls very short of the standard they've set for the other figures. Maybe they were just scaling back the focus from this figure, putting the majority of effort into the chunky boys. Tarn and Ultra Magnus really pushed the limits of what's possible under the traditional torso assembly. They're basically not even using the original ball joints anymore. They're incorporating dedicated wider ones that make them feel a lot bigger. I don't know if it works that well on Ultra Magnus though. He feels a bit wide for my taste. It doesn't feel like this was designed for these specific proportions. I can accept something like SS86 because it's designed around those wider shoulders. The standard Blokees system isn't, and combined with a somewhat bland shins, it's not really doing anything for me. Also not feeling the torso tampos, not quite as bland as Shockwave, but in the same ballpark. Tarn though, this is some good shit. They use that trick where they elongate the knee pads to make the shins feel a lot longer than they actually are. It's a technique I've seen used on Iron Factory Optimus Prime specifically. It's subtle, but it works rather well. The torso is to die for, really nailing the bruiser feeling. It's halfway between MMC's and Iron Factory's takes, which works well with the Blokees semi-chibi modus operandi. Combined with some really cool layering effects as well as some actual paintwork instead of simple tamper graphs, you can tell this one's the main focus of the wave. And honestly, absolutely fair. Tarn is a novel character. Until recently, we never really thought he would get a toy at all. And now we have multiple, which is pretty funny. Is he my favorite of the wave? Nah, I'd say the Constructicons take the cake for me. But he's still quite good. Only gripe is how dinky the gun looks, but at this size, that's not really an issue. If I had to rank the Tarns in my collection, it would probably go Legacy, then MMC, then Blokees, then Iron Factory, then Legacy Cyberverse, though I've since fixed that one with Toy Hacks. He's not the best Tarn I've ever come across, but he is very good. And I really hope they experiment with the format more. In this format, that is. We'll get to Classics class later. That's not the only case of going above and beyond, though, because we still have the wave's darling, the tiny snarts. Initially, I thought this was a case where you had one release that could be built as either the dinosaur or robot mode, but no, these are supposed to be separate figures. Within the Blokees micro-fandom, people have been going nuts over these, and I can see why. They're bloody adorable. The robot mode a little less so, it's decent for what it is, but I don't particularly get anything from it. Maybe because Snarl in general isn't a Dinobot I go nuts for outside of the amazing 86 version. Just something about the face and the proportions and the hollow backpack make it all fall a little flat for me. It's not a bad figure by any stretch of the imagination, but I've seen a lot of amazing shit from Blokees by now, and this doesn't really make me feel the same. But the dinosaur mode, well, it's not the best of the wave, but I fuck with this a lot more. It's really intricate in its assembly, turning the whole standard on its head and being an adventure in itself. Any of the parts are shared across the two of them, but they're used in completely different ways. It's not enough to make me want to get all of them, but it's enough to see that they can take a base and use it to reach new heights of reassembly creativity. And I think that's the big thing I got from this wave, more so than the previous ones. Ones I both have and haven't come across. They've been experimenting with the limits of the systems they've put in place. And I don't think they've reached those limits. There's a metric ton they can do, a metric ton they can achieve. And of course, this is all within the Galaxy class price point. They can still keep it at the current weight while still pushing the envelope and doing crazy creative things. Now I know the next order of business is the Transformers 1 stuff, but I do really hope they come back to this unified style and give some more obscure characters the chance to shine. And that's where I thought I'd leave this video. This is all I believed I would need to cover. I could reach my conclusions, put out a nice short sponsored sample like I usually do, and call it a done deal. But they, kinda went above and beyond. I might have been given a few extra things than I initially anticipated.
Let them come.
This right here is what's referred to as Classic Class. These are an extension of the traditional Blokees building system, with primarily specialized pieces and more heroic proportions. They still use the standard torso piece, but even that comes with LEDs to up the premium feel of the price points. LEDs nuts.
Lamau, got him!
I do think that the names of the two price points probably should have been switched, but it's all just product in the end, so it doesn't really matter. One of their first releases was a take on Rise of the Beasts Optimus Prime. In fact, it would seem the majority of their Rotber lineup was done this way. The best way to describe it is the 30-minute missions of the Blokees line. The assembly is very similar, only a bit more layered to fine-tune the movieverse aesthetic with all of its panels on panels on panels. It's an easy enough build that doesn't go balls to the walls, but it doesn't particularly need to. The end result is a little lankier than the other Blokees, but it's a very nice balance between the two defined aesthetics. I think I might actually prefer it to the studio series Voyager, probably partially because that thing disappoints to no end in its vehicle mode. Seriously, if you're gonna f up the vehicle mode that poorly and say it's better because of the accuracy, you might as well just make an Action Master. Oh wait. I absolutely love the way the detailing is done. It's very cuboid, but it layers itself very well. If anything, it's probably better defined than the movie itself, which, to be honest, was a great big slab of nothing. The head sculpt is pretty neat, even though it's pretty easy to get this head sculpt to look good. The LED effects are quite nice, only requiring you to shake the thing for a bit to activate them. Would have preferred a simple switch, but they probably wanted to have the back as clean and well-toned as a femboy confidant. It's probably the only part that's a bit simple overall. The rest has truly divine layering effects. I mean, look at these legs, they're amazing, and yet they're only a few carefully placed pieces in the grand scheme of things. Then you get the articulation into the mix, which is the same and as good as the Galaxy class figures, and he truly comes alive. See, the thing about sculpt work is that it usually accentuates posing. You ever come across a figure that technically has a lot of great articulation, but it just seems to fall flat? Well, that's kind of the reason why. And it also goes the other way, with a figure that has limited articulation being elevated by immaculate sculpt work. This Prime is both, and the end result is very nice. There's not a lot I can really fault this Prime with. It's well sculpted, well built, well articulated, pretty much everything you could want. If I had to take any issues, really it's just three things. The Matrix cavity is a bit silly, and it could have used a clear insert to make better use of it, but that's something that can be easily ignored. Not like he had a Matrix in the movie anyway. Wrong MacGuffin. Secondly, the colors are a bit off. The blue just feels a bit too pastel for my liking, but it's easy enough to ignore. And thirdly, the shoulder armor likes to fall off, but that's a really easy fix with some glue. Just gonna wait until after the video's done and go to town. Other than that though, yeah, I don't have a lot to say. It's probably my favorite interpretation of the character design, maybe not my favorite toy, but the things it does to the screen model just work for me. Also, massive positive, it helps me calm down after a panic attack, so it's got a really warm place in my heart.
If you want a boxer, I will step into the ring for you.
I've got to admit, I've never been the biggest fan of the 07 Megatron design. It always seemed a bit chaotic and messy to me. It didn't have the clear theming the other bots and cons from the same film embodied. Maybe it's because I was never really exposed to the design as a child, as I never got any of the figures. In my defense, they didn't look very good. Or maybe it's because my primary introduction was the DS games, where he looked closer to a crack dealer in a back alley. Really should probably replay those games someday. I did greatly enjoy the Studio Series outing, but that one took a few liberties by virtue of being a retool, particularly in the torso and legs. In its standard form, it's just not a design that I get that excited for, and not one I've actively sought out representation of in toy form. As such, Blokees 07 Megatron isn't a figure that usually would have gotten me excited, but oh boy am I glad I got a chance to try him. The new 2007 range of Blokees figures is like the previous classic class on steroids. You can't even tell the original torso is in there. It's metamorphized so extensively that it feels completely different. In fact, it basically has the original proportions of the screen model, save for a slightly bigger head. This does mean that it loses the Blokees stylization, the vibe that made the company so popular in the first place, but I don't really know how it would work for this character design anyway. Prime, maybe, but definitely not Megatron. Of course, you can't do a figure like this without some level of stylization. This isn't supposed to be a picture-perfect representation of the screen model, so something has to change. And my god, it was so simple I should have realized it earlier. Make the inner frame gold! The entire robot is a beautiful blend of metallic twin shades. It's so obvious that these colors go together, but me, these go so well together. Now, looking back at the screen model, there are inner bits that are gold, but they're very subtle and you'd miss them if you blinked. This is where a lot of those highlights on the movie masterpiece come from, but on this outing, it's much more pronounced. It's an easy aesthetic quirk to forget. I mean, I didn't even realize, as I'm so used to the toys relying on gunmetal instead. Combined with the already great layering assembly, it leans into the Bayverse alien style incredibly well. Then you bring back the Blokees big leg format, which, as said earlier, is an aesthetic I always adore, and they turn Megatron from a chaotic mess into a resplendent regent. They essentially drape this perfect balance of aesthetic choices over an already great articulated base, and you end up with something way better than it has any right to be. They haven't been 100% faithful, but the changes they've made are purposeful and finely crafted. These guys have way more respect for the original animation model than I would. I mean, if I was making a toy like this, I doubt I would have bothered with hiding the Allspark in the chest. Shame the torso lights are buggered on my copy though. They worked a grand total of once and then ceased completely. At least the eyes still light up, so you can feel the full force of his constipation. Seriously, am I the only one who sees it in his head sculpt? He's like Ivan Ooze after a night of all-you-can-eat sushi. Two restaurant terms that should never come together. I'm not going to pretend this is my favorite Megatron design, especially in the face of other more fully realized takes. If Blokees were ever to do these, I might actually go for them instead of being content to try the samples out at random. I do have to acknowledge one key thing though. They took one I don't normally care about and turned it into something I'm actually glad to see. Especially in the photography. This does things that I normally wouldn't feel from an 07 Megatron design. Of course, that's all well and good, but there's no way you could beat the true pinnacle of Blokees releases. 2007 Optimus Prime, to me, is an undeniable classic. I mean, how could it not be? The 2007 movie was the primary introduction into the franchise for many, including myself. Over the years, I've always wanted the perfect representation of the character. The 2009 Leader Class outing was enough for me as a kid, but as I grow older, I've always wanted one that built something new from the ground up and offered something that truly captured his presence on screen. That was partially why I never really gelled with Wei-Jang Thunder Leader. Although in all honesty, that was one of the least applicable reasons in the face of abysmal materials, nightmarish conversion, and anything else designated a side effect of the company's absurd hubris. And sure, the original 07 Leader was more in line with the simplicity and engineering I was desiring, but it didn't really occupy the space I was hoping for. Studio Series was the same, a fantastic release that I feel doesn't get enough credit, but still just a standard Voyager/Leader, depending on which version you got. They were fantastic, but not what I was looking for. I never expected a non-transforming figure to fill a hole in my collecting desires, even for just the time being. I did want this outing before I was given it for free, but I never expected to be blown away like this. Blokees 2007 Prime is unmistakably the best release of theirs I've come across. It's been a damn long time since I've connected this much with an Optimus Prime figure, 2007 or no. Again, it's just sort of the screen model with a slightly bigger head, but they've put the most care into this I've seen of anything of theirs I've come across so far. The head sculpt is right on the money. It misses some of the paint applications, but it manages to cover all the bases layers and still deliver the stoicism Prime is known for. It's sort of similar to Studio Series in that regard, though it easily trumps that figure in its torso. The layering effect reaches its ingenuity peak here, with the windows bobbing and weaving around the other plastic pieces. You can't even tell the Blokees torso is in there anymore, save for the glowing torso. No matrix of leadership this time, but like, is that even necessary? In general, the layering on this thing is immaculate. It seriously looks like he's stepped off the screen, with the only major difference being he applied the big head cheat from Bionicle Heroes DS. A lot of DS references in this video, swear it wasn't intentional. There are some parts that are a smidge simplified, such as the arms with their sticky outy bits, but you can't deny they've gone above and beyond in every area. I mean, take a look at the back. How many figures, transforming or no, just give up on this point? They even put a trailer hitch in there. I don't know if that's accurate or not, but either way, it's an insane detail. And the crazy thing is, it's relatively simple to build. This didn't take 1 billion pieces and 3 days to put together. It's smart in its assembly, making clever use of sprue space. It's a bit bigger than Legends at this point, but it very much embodies the simplicity first mantra, only in its build instead of its non-existent transformation. Then you bring in the tamper graphing and he just soars. It may not have the pinstriping, but that's so minor considering this guy barely cracks deluxe price. Their strategic positioning around the design really elevates everything. It again feels way more premium than the price point would normally deliver. The perfect blending of color and sculpting is exceptional, and when brought to life with the same old posing, there he is. There 2007 Optimus Prime is. I realize a lot of this comes down to my nostalgic bias, but seriously, I don't have much negative to say with this. It's clear that from every angle they've made sure that the design is carried across with care. Really, my only gripe is one of the same issues I had with the Rise of the Beast version, the wheels. They try to differentiate them with a different gunmetal, but it just doesn't work. They look a bit bland in comparison to everything else on the design, but other than that, it's Christmas. Look, I'ma be honest, this is the reason I turned this into a full video. I could have just done a simple product showcase and called it a day, even if I liked the product a lot, which I often really do. But in this instance, it didn't just connect with me, it inspired me to write about it. Above all else, Blokees has captured the feel of the character, more so than any other third party I've seen recently attempt such. It's what I've been craving for a very long time, a version that captures the essence of 07 Prime. For that reason, I find myself preferring the Magnificent Mecha version of the character to the Unique Toys one, despite the fact Unique Toys is infinitely more accurate. Magnificent Mecha feels like 2007 Prime, and Blokees does too. It's not an easy thing to pull off. Companies have tried and failed constantly through figures, statues, and even subscriptions. And yet, here we are. And I gotta say, that's pretty f***ing commendable. So it's pretty clear they know what they're doing with their figures, but that doesn't explain their success. For all the gushing I have to go on with them, it really boils down to a few factors. Number 1, filling the void potentially left by core class. Whether the price point is ending or not, I'm not sure, but I do know one thing. At the very least, it's winding down. We're seeing fewer and fewer releases as these spawns of Satan slowly but surely take their place. People want cheap and simple desk toys to mess with, and although these don't transform, even at their most complex, they fill that void with simple build processes. At most, you're taking half an hour. You can do these in your lunch break, so they're desirable. They also fill the collectability aspect of Legends figures. You want to get all of them and have a massive army in front of you. Blokees goes places Hasbro isn't particularly wholehearted in at the moment, and people are noticing. Secondly, clear aesthetic choice. Unlike many examples, these aren't just adding stylization for the sake of stylization. They're specifically choosing a middle ground between standard proportions and super deformed adorability, so that a wider audience can engage with them. The line work is all consistent, and everything sweeps downward with visual interest. When you buy a Blokees figure, you know what you're getting into. It's no roll of the dice whether it's going to be a genuinely brilliant experience or just a stand-in until a better one comes around. And thirdly, just overall quality. You can have a toy that's in the right place and at the right time to create a subcultural phenomenon, but if it's a piece of shit, what's the point? I'm not going to say all Blokees figures are fantastic. There are some that fall below the par, but most of the time, they go hard, and when that happens, you know you're in for a real treat. I'm not sure who's behind Blokees, but it's clear they know what they're doing, and their endearment within the community is well deserved. Of course, the question remains, what now? Where do they go from here? Well, they're delving into Transformers 1 is a fantastic start. I'm actually considering grabbing a few of them and expanding— What the f***? I don't know what happened, but midway through the whole video production, they just sent me another package. I genuinely thought this was the incoming funhole thing I'm supposed to get, but apparently not. Anyway, these might seem like your old standard film tie-ins. ones. But there's one thing to remember, the cogless bots are actually reasonably in scale with the standard deluxes from both Studio Series and mainline. As such, it's a guaranteed recipe for success right there. I don't know if I'll do another full review on these, but definitely expect a sponsored showcase in the new year covering them. Now, if they were to take my advice, they'd expand this to Action Masters and Pretenders, because right now there's no truly accurate and genuinely good updates. I said truly accurate. And I said genuinely good, you can't have both. They also seem to be moving closer to the chibi style of things, with some cheaper outings. I'm not sure how well this will sell outside of Asia. Memories of Q Transformers shell forming at anime conventions for years comes to mind. I'm sure they know what they're doing though, and whatever they do next will also be spectacular. They've already gotten over the first hurdle, actually breaking into the licensed third-party market. Now that they've carved out a niche, the next big question remains. How will they take things to even further heights?
Lost episodes. Where do they come from? Where do they go? Where do they come from, Cotton Eye Joe? I've made a lot of videos over the years on the channel, but not all of them have seen the light of day. There was once a video I had for Studio Series Helicopter Drift showing how it was worse than Dropkick in every conceivable way. I was going through the filming process of Iron Factory The Fallen, the first one that is, but I felt it was just kind of a nothing script. I just wasn't really feeling it. 2 reviews I've done in the past have been outright removed due to copyright claims, and I do apologize for that. But this one's an interesting case. It's a Legendary video, and there hasn't really been a lost episode in that sense before. See, when Blokees hit the scene before I even received any samples from them, everyone in the community was talking about them. You could not go 2 centimeters on any website without people discussing Blokees. And I kind of thought to myself, is it really justified? Are they really that good? So I thought, why not do a non-sponsored video? Why not just take a look at them and take a look at them objectively, which I did end up doing in the sponsored samples anyway. But still, there were issues that I ran into. And surprisingly, those issues were not to do with the fact that I was sponsored by Blokees. I didn't just get rid of the episode because I already had one that did it in every way. Even though I did use part of that video to explain how they were built, I kind of just repurposed that. No, the issue that I ran into was a bit more of a concern. Now, one of the big ways that Blokees keeps the costs down on these is, well, you can see from the box right here, they're blind packed. Instead of telling you exactly which figure you're gonna get, they basically have generic packaging with all of the optional ones on the side. You got anything from this series over here, as well as the Chase figure that I will probably never get. It's essentially like the Lego minifigure packets. You don't know what you're gonna get in them, but they have all of the things on the front here. You basically just have to take a gamble and open it up, and what I get. Let's see, I don't know who that is. I think it's Hawkeye? Oh yeah, it's a Hawkeye of sorts. It's Kate Bishop. But you get the idea. Much like those Lego minifigures, they're sort of just cheap things that you can collect all if you want, or if you got a bit of extra cash, you can just add this onto an existing order. Which is what I did when I first got them. I was going to pick up a comic. I think it was Destro number 3. It was very boring, but I picked up 4 of these at around the same time, and this will be my 5th one. Interestingly, at the time of recording this, I don't actually know which one of these I'm going to be reviewing. Yes, because I've decided I'm going to be filming the building process. I'm just going to see what I get and lock myself into it. You all probably know which one it is because you clicked on the video with the title and everything, but I flat out don't. So let's see what we got. It was the last one at the comic shop when I went to pick it up. Is it one I've gotten already, or is it a really nice one? Out we go, out we go. We got the 2 silver bags. The instructions are just generic. They all show Optimus Prime. So you don't really know until you crack these puppies open. Ah, it's Prowl. We will get you, said Prowl. So Dropot looked inside his very own arm and found Double Bazooka and his other more bigger gun. You don't really need to separate these as much as you would a normal model kit because they are very, very simple. Like, building this is really easy. First thing you want to do is find the feet. They're exactly the same. They're identical, not mirrored. So you can use whatever you want. Just put them down to the side here. Next up, you want to take these pieces, which are the backs of the legs. And then you take these pieces, which are the ball joints, which again are also identical across all of them. And you plug it into the bottom of the foot like so. It has a nice click. One big gripe I have with these figures, clear ball joints. Much like the bump of Chicken Bumble, this seems like it's asking for trouble. Making load-bearing joints out of clear plastic is not a good idea. In fact, I've heard reports of these being broken. So it's not an isolated incident. It does happen, so you do have to be quite careful. Anywho, what you want to do again is take the front piece, and sometimes the printing is different, so take a closer look at that. Since I'm going to be doing the right leg first, I'll do that over there. That has highway, and the other one will be patrol. Clip those together. Clip him into the feet. And same with the other leg. If you really want to keep them out of the way so that they're easier to keep track of, you can also place them on the stand. It's a nice little thing to do. It helps you get a bit more leverage on them too. There are two identical sprues which become the shoulder assemblies, the elbows, and the knees. And the elbows and knees are both identical as well, so really you can just use whatever. The model kit builder in me is telling me to use proper clippers for this, but they are quite loose, so you can sort of just push them out. And for the purpose of this video, just to keep things a bit simple, I'm going to do that. Plus, if you happen to be building these in like a shopping center or something because you just bought them, you can also do that. Though, don't build these in a shopping center. It's sort of a disaster waiting to happen with lost pieces and all that. And here you take the two pieces and you peg them together, and that is what you got there. And it doesn't really matter which side you clip them into. It's all basically the same. You just kind of peg it in there. There we go. And of course, second verse same as the first. If you want to do all of these back to back and then just have them lying around to assemble, you can also do that too. Good news, the thigh pieces are completely identical. Again, they are not mirrored. So it doesn't matter which order you put them in, they both work either way. Waist joint, it is symmetrical, so again, it does not matter which way you put it. Now, the waist armors do get a bit different. Some of them are different from front to back, like Prowl's here, but some of them are also identical, so it really depends on which one you're getting. With this one, it's the same piece, but one has printing, one doesn't, so that's pretty self-explanatory. Also is pretty self-explanatory, just pegs in, you pull the shoulder pieces out, and peg them into either shoulder, whichever one you feel like. The front and the back pieces are pretty self-explanatory, you just kind of know what they already are. One thing that you do have to do is make sure the shoulders are lined up correctly, because they got those two pegs there that'll actually line up with the way the backpack and the chest plate work. So that when you click everything together, it should all go nice and solidly, and these ones should only get a little bit of motion instead of way too much. The shoulder pieces are identical though, so you can just pop them on however you like. Shoulder armor is sculpted identically, but the front parts are printed differently, so that's something to keep an eye on. Yours may be completely identical though, so just keep an eye on it. We'll need the joints to be made as well now for the elbows. Now, the arms are actually the one part that you do need to keep an eye on. They're the same across most figures, but you'll notice these ports on the outsides. They're actually for the accessories that they come with. So what you need to do is make sure when you go to peg it in, make sure that the hole is on the outside. That way you can ensure the full functionality of the accessories. Not the accessories are that crazy, but it's a thing that works a bit better. This sprue is for the hands. You can use whichever hand you feel like. I'm just going to use the fists because they're nice and simple. And this one will depend on the figure you get, but you'll notice there's parts on the back for different backpack pieces. In the case of Prowl, you've got door wings, that just peg on the backpack like so, and opposable cannons, like so on the top on the ball joints. Come on, get in there. Ah, that is way tighter than it should be. Last but not least, everything should be very self-explanatory. You take the last ball joint and peg it into the top there, take the face sculpt and peg it in the top there. Yeah, that is very creepy. And you take the helmet and it should just get on the top there. It's squishy until it clicks into place. There we go. And you can just remove the accessories and everything else you might have. Ooh, spare ball joint. Don't know why that's there. And completed, basically what you see is what you get. It is a non-transforming figure, as many licensed third-party figures are. You know, technically what we call third-party isn't actually third-party. Third-party refers to licensed figures like these. And what we refer to as third-party is actually basically bootlegs. But I mean, you wouldn't be dead
Yeah, you're not hearing an editing mistake there. The audio just went at that point. This is why the video was cancelled initially. This is why I swapped things around. Just, I was editing up until this point, and then suddenly... Oops! There's no audio! For some bizarre reason, the exportation of the microphone audio just glitched out there. And unfortunately, I didn't have the original file to go back and take it from. Now, initially the plan was to re-record from that point. I mean, you would have noticed a difference in nail color change. But it would have been fine. It's just like, re-record, just make a joke about how I had to re-record this bit. Just go over everything I went through with that. It would have been easy. But then I ended up actually getting sponsored by Blokees, and I'm like, there's no real purpose. I can just reuse the building section and pop it into that video. It's one less thing for me to do. Nice and easy, no problem. But now, looking back on it, I do want this video to be available to see in some capacity. I had a lot of fun recording it, not the most fun in the world, but it was kind of fun. And I don't like leaving things unfinished. I like a sense of closure, so here it is now, I guess. Unfortunately, the rest of the video will feature far worse audio. I do apologize for that, but unfortunately, you gotta do what you gotta do. So from here, we're continuing.
But I mean, you wouldn't be dead calling those bootlegs in the community. It's just not how the colloquialisms work. But it is something to keep in mind, so when someone goes, actually, it's the bootleg. They're technically right, but they're still just being an asshole. And Prowl here is a pretty good figure. He has his problems, but for what you're paying, it's done really well. One thing I've mentioned on this channel many times before is the issues with third-party stylization, and that extends to licensed third parties as well. Many third-party figures just look really ugly because they're just stylizing it for the sake of stylizing it. They're not really picking a specific aesthetic. It's not something you can criticize every company of, but it's definitely there for a lot of them. Blockees, for the most part, don't fall under that. They have a very specific aesthetic, and it sort of works. It's not quite chibi, it's sort of in that half point. We got the exaggerated proportions with the bigger head and the bigger limbs and everything, but it doesn't go so far into it that it's a completely chibi figure. It pulls back just enough where you can tell what the point of the figure is, and I do appreciate that. The sculpting is pretty nice. It's angular where it needs to be, and it's blocky where it needs to be as well. Haha, blockies, I get it now. Poses reasonably. I mean, you got ball joints pretty much everywhere on the head, like so. The guns rotate, so you get a bit of posing out of those. 2 ball joints on the shoulders, but in practice it only really works on one and a hinge. Bicep swivel, elbow that gets you just beyond 90, wrist ball joint, waist swivel, which is very nice, ball joints at the hips that have no impeding whatsoever, thigh swivel, and an extra knee bend, and a ball joint at the foot, so the articulation works alright, except for the fact that the ball joints are made out of clear plastic. Again, as I said, this can lead to breakages, and I've heard of them leading to breakages. But that aside, another interesting thing to note, technically there's not really much paint on the figure. I mean, you got a little bit of paint on the head crest, and I guess the eyes maybe, but the rest of this isn't actually paint, it's tampografts. Yeah, they're all tampos, not really traditional paint. Tampograph waist section, tampographed hips, tampographed legs, tampographed shoulders, tampographed torso, tampographed doors, and they're done very, very well. I suppose doing that instead of paint helps keep the cost down, which, you know, it's a pretty clever way of doing it. And they go really hard with it, like they've even tampographed the back of it. That's not a sculpted light bar, which is a bit unfortunate, but the fact they went to the effort is quite commendable. And that's really one of the big ways that they keep the costs down. The way I see it, there are 4 main methods. You got the fact they're blind packed, so you don't know which one you're gonna get. The fact you have to assemble them, they're not pre-assembled, so assembly costs are kept down. The fact they don't use paint because everything's tampographed. And then there's a 4th thing, which might at first seem a little bit iffy, but I actually think it's brilliant. These figures are, in essence, at least from what I've experienced with this wave, all retools of each other. Now, I'm not just talking about redecos and retools that would make sense, like having the Datsuns be exactly the same. Obviously, Blue Streak is going to be exactly the same as Prowl. It makes sense. You know, they were the same toy in G1, what do you expect? But no, it actually goes beyond that. Let's bring in Jazz here, another figure that I have from the same line. Notice anything interesting? Torso is exactly the same, just with wheels instead of guns. The inner chest is exactly the same. The shoulders are exactly the same. In fact, the entire arm assemblies are exactly the same. These are the exact same assemblies. The hip sections are exactly the same. The thighs are exactly the same. The feet are exactly the same. And the front of the legs, well, they aren't. But you go to the backs and you'll notice that the actual assemblies, the back sections, which form the overall skeleton of the figure, they are also the same. And you'll notice that even the back section is completely the same, just with different tampografts. And this works really well, so you can actually take the wings off Jazz so that you can go for the toon accurate look instead of the toy accurate one. A nice little feature I found with him, although I've always preferred the door wings personally, just because, I don't know, I like toy accuracy. But it goes to show they're largely based around the same figure. They're largely based around the same inner workings. And it goes even further than that. Let's bring in Ironhide. Surely this is going to be different, right? Same inner chest, same arm assemblies, same thighs, and the same inner workings on the legs and the same feet. The front of the legs are different, but everything else is the same, even the same fists. Even the heads are exactly the same, it's just the helmets that are different. And this is actually one of my gripes with this figure. The face sculpts they've done kind of look a bit ugly. They look better when they're visored up or they've got a face mask on them. As it stands, they're a little bit iffy in the way they're designed. But still, they're reusing a lot of pieces. Even Optimus Prime, of all things. He has a lot more new parts than you would expect. New torso, new shoulders, new waist section, new fronts of the feet, new waist section, new fronts of the legs. Even new backs of the legs. They've put a lot more into this. But the waist section is still the same. The forearms and the fists are still the same. The thighs are still the same. They're all retools of each other, and that's a big way they're able to keep the costs down. And that's why they're able to charge so little for these. Basically a few bucks more than being an Authentics figure. And yes, they don't transform. That is a big downside with with them. They're never going to be as fun as a traditional Transformer because that conversion is gone, aside from maybe rebuilding a few of the Dinobots in both dinosaur mode or robot mode. At their core, they're never going to be as playable as a proper Transformer. But for the price you're paying, basically, they're doing really well. And they even come with accessories. I mean, Prowl's basically got his little blaster, nice and simple. Also a retool, Jazz has the exact same blaster, just in black. Blue Streak obviously does as well. And even Ironhide, though he comes with a blast effect. And if you want, you can also use these open hands to have a sort of more relaxed pose in the fists. So I'm not really a fan of them personally. I don't think they really contribute to much of the posing, but I mean, you can see how they work on the thumbnail. They can give you the JoJo pose if you really want to. He also comes with a badge that has an Autobot symbol on one side and a Decepticon symbol on the other. This is why you have to have the ports on the outside so that they can function with the badge thing here. It's a bit unwieldy to use and I don't really get much use out of it, but it's a thing you can do if you want to. And finally, also comes with a stand. I know I've been making JoJo jokes, but I don't think that's appropriate here. It's basically what you'd come to expect. You got the logo over there, puts them in an A stance, nice and easy. But one thing that I find really neat is that you can actually connect them together. A bit tight to get in there, but yeah, once you get in, you can have them all lined up on a shelf in a nice display. This might be how I display my Blockees, and I do think I'll probably get some more after this. I'm not going to pretend they're the most amazing figures ever, but for the price, they're pretty good. I'd sooner take one of these over those dogshit Authentics figures. I would definitely do that. And for anyone curious as to why he's showing up in the Legendary Marathon, he is very much a small scale figure, coming in at 7 centimeters wide and 10 centimeters tall. And for size comparisons, here he is next to a standard Legion figure. Goes to show when you factor in paint costs and assembly costs and the fact it has to transform and the fact it's not blind packed, there's not a lot you can really do at this price point. I still do very much think this is worth that same price bracket, but it goes to show you're getting a lot for what you pay. Especially when you consider he's basically the same size as a standard core class figure. If not a little bit bigger, but I guess they can do that given all the concessions. Anywho, finishing off a standard modern Micromaster, a standard modern Minicon, a not so standard Lego minifigure, and crumbs.
And yeah, I guess that was the lost episode. I don't really have the traditional intro and conclusion like I would in the normal space that I used for the other Legendary episodes this year, or I guess last year, although still this year, given it was delayed to absolute shit. I ended up swapping it around before I filmed that section, so that just doesn't exist. Instead, it's just me over here. Hello there! But aside from that, there's not really much I have to say here. Not much that I can say that I haven't already said in these 3 videos here. I am recording this before Blokees Bonanza 3. I don't even know what the title's gonna be, to be honest. But yeah, that's it from me. If you're watching this on Patreon, hope you enjoyed this lost episode, and if you're watching this in the doc takes, hope you enjoyed this lost episode. Usually I have such conclusive endings, but I don't really have that for this time. To stylize or not to stylize? That is the question. This past while, Blokees has found insane success in carving out a space for themselves within the fandom. It's all very carefully crafted, slotting into a niche that Hasbro is distancing themselves from, using carefully applied parts reuse to keep the costs down, making sure they're dense. It's no accident that they became as popular as they did. The entire concept is tailor-made for Transformers, though they are definitely expanding. If I hear anyone insulting Sesame Street, well, let's just say...
Start running.
However, as much as those factors are at play, stylization cannot be understated. The Blokees aesthetic was carefully chosen, a wonderful middle ground between super deformed and traditional robots. The proof is in the pudding. Plenty of people who would never buy super deformed characters are grabbing these in droves. However, what happens when you slowly start to move away from that? Transformers 1 has proven a massive success within the community. The box office sadly leaves a lot to be desired, no thanks to the abysmal marketing, but Transformers fans are eating up the thing faster than a pack of donuts in the office. Problem is, the merchandise hasn't really capitalized on this. We have a few deluxes, a couple of waves of gimmick toys, and 2 Studio Series figures. Compared to Rise of the Beasts, it's honestly really lacking. There's only been one consistent output in regards to this film, one facet that's been going full speed ahead for the whole thing. Blokees. But here's the thing, Transformers 1 already has its own specific style. Blokees also has a very specific style, or head-to-torso ratio, and Transformers 1, abiding by the traditional proportional choice of most 3D animated movies, kinda already fits into that. Thing is, when you lose the style you've built up, is that a blessing or a curse? Will a greater adherence to the screen model be a boon for their popularity, or will they lose what made the company so special in the first place? Greetings, Cybertronians, I'm DrLockdown, and today's diagnosis brings us back to the wonderful world of Blokees. Yeah, I didn't expect to make one of these so soon, but I was kind of on a roll with the last video, and then on top of that, one of the videos I had for this marathon had to be canned because Glide broke, and the replacement won't arrive in time, so I had to shove in something else at the last minute. Shit happens, we gotta do what we gotta do, and to be honest, I think my head is in a better space to write this sort of script at this specific time. Anyway, I don't have any fancy intros or explanations on what Blokees are, or how they came to be, or who is your daddy and what does he do. The answer is teaching and his students, by the way. You can go back and watch the original video for a rundown of how all this shit works. I think it's best we just raw dog right into this. Here we go! Yeah, we're sort of shuffling things around in release order for this one, because literally as I was finishing the filming for episode 160, I just came across this wave at King's Comics. They were adamant they were skipping this one too, but apparently not. So I did what I usually do and jumped at the chance. The assortment I ended up with was considerably more low-key than what I've covered so far, mostly because these figures are much earlier in the company's Transformers life cycle. Like Shattered Glass Optimus Prime. He's fine, I guess. But out of the four, I think he might be my least favorite Primer-like. Now, a lot of this does come down to me. My preference on SG Primes is them leaning more to the bluer side of purple rather than the redder, duller one, which isn't exactly accurate to the character. Chalk it up to my preference of Eva Convoy, but it's just what I like. And it's why I gravitated towards the Earthrise Selects one so well. And this Prime is more accurate, so it doesn't particularly do much for me. I can't call it bad by any means, though. It's categorically a well-crafted release. The paintwork is crisp, the tamper-graphing is probably the best of the four, especially with the forearm arrows. The green-grey head crest is resplendent, the waist section is gorgeous. There are plenty of things about this figure that I can recognize are done insanely well. To call this bad is just wrong. It's a good Blockee. It just isn't something that's particularly up my alley. Functionally, I'd probably call it the second best of the four, right under Nemesis Prime, but personally, it's just my least favorites. And that's okay. Not everyone has to vibe with every single design. Lord knows there's been things I bought that I thought were good, but just not for me, time and time again. Of course, the universe hates me for some reason, so this is the one I ended up getting duplicates of. Twice the pride, double the selling off. Coming soon to an eBay page near you. Side note, please don't ask me to sell my figures in the comments. It always leads to frustrations. I'll sell them as I choose. And it's not like this wave didn't get anything for me either. I mean, I got pretty lucky with Long Haul. Would have liked both Constructicons from the set, but hey, tracking down 2 more instead of 3 is still a positive. With that said, I do think is ultimately the weakest of the 4 I've covered so far. I'd still put him above everything else I've gotten in this wave from a personal standpoint, but he definitely feels slightly like a downgrade. The sculpting is really nice, especially with the head and chest. They've managed to capture the roundness whilst still having the panel on the back. It's a wonderful blend of toon and toy, and with the sharp sculpt, it looks mean as fuck. The torso also has lots of greebling lines, and hypothetically, it could look very cool. It's just a shame that unfortunately it's missing a lot of color, as I can't imagine it's very easy to add silver and gunmetal to the front without liberal use of paints. And that's really the main issue overall. There's just not a lot of color breakup. There's not much room to fit in the tamper graphs. And given this is the second wave, they haven't really begun to experiment with proper paints like they did in later waves. Even the midriff sort of seems like it's separate from the rest of the design. There's not as much clever integration with the rest. At least we got the inner purple frame, though. I guess the biggest thing is I wish they'd done something more creative with the legs. They just sort of exist. I know it's not possible to really do the inverted bucket leg look on the traditional Blockee skeleton, but something else would have been nice. I still like him, though. I guess the Constructicons have the touch and the power with their color scheme. And there are things I find really neat, such as the extra paint on the pipe section, the awesome bucket hoodie, the hand replacements, which would be really nice to see on some of the other third-party versions. And again, the head sculpt. I cannot stress enough that I love this head sculpt. It's just a little difficult to point out everything I do like, as it's already been discussed at length in relation to the other members covered in the last video. But above all else, it's just another great member in the lineup. Even if it categorically is the weakest. There's just something special about seeing the 4 of them all lined up, and fuck me dead, I want to get the last 2 so bad. While Long Haul is my favorite though, the best would easily have to be Starscream. If any Blockee could be described as serving this would hold that distinction extremely. I mean, just look at his face, shit-eating grin and eyeshadow and all. It's good to see they've started fixing some of the head sculpts as early as the second wave, as although it's still a bit squished, it's way better than the first few outings. It also uses the tamper graph stylings really well, especially with the midriff. That's such a good optical illusion. From most angles, it actually looks like a proper indent. The arms and legs are pretty par for the course, but the shoulders do really well with the added null rays. I was half expecting them to just plonk them onto the sides of the wrists, not that such would be bad, I do that with my favorite Seeker mold of all time. But no, they actually remolded the shoulders. That's really commendable, as is the inclusion of the most famous Target Master of all time. Funny how the stock has to be sideways to fit under the forearm, though. Lol, and I must say, Lamau. The null ray thing does mean that they end up covering the wings, which have some really lovely detail on them, but they still go hard with their dedicated tamper graphing. See, this is the kind of paint detail that Long Haul should have had. Come on! Will say though, I do find it funny that the $10 Blockee is able to do the wings infinitely better than the $90 reissue from the retro line. Toon accurate, my ass. This is just inexcusable. The last traditional release I received from this wave was Cliffjumper, and honestly, I don't have a lot to say about him. The mechanical detail is pretty standard, the tamper graphing is pretty minimalist. My only enjoyment from him is that the head is kinda cool, I guess. I realize the Penny Racer mini-bots were pretty simplistic designs overall, but especially going into a style like this, I don't particularly get much from it. It's not bad, but I'm finding it really difficult to find anything to write about him. So I guess that leaves us the weirdo of the group, Grimlock. And you know what? I think I actually get it now. Grimlock is designed very much in the same way as Snarl was. Although I guess it would be more accurate to say Snarl is designed in the same way as Grimlock, as this was the first wave to give us Dinobots. And yeah, things make a lot more sense now. The way the parts all click together, the way they rearrange themselves, now it actually feels like they have a clear idea going on. With Snarl, it sort of felt like they were pushing the style to its absolute limits, and less in a creative way, more like they hit a roadblock, but with Grimlock, it feels more inspired. I can see the oversized head Blokees styling peeking through a lot more, and he looks very adorable for it. The mechanical detail sort of reminds me of Warpaint, and he ends up looking like a toddler playing armies on the playground as a result. He adorable. The tamper graphing is minimalist, but unlike Cliffjumper, it doesn't really matter that much with how the color breakup works. The grey and yellow combo works very well. I love how they kept the tamper graphing on the torso, even though it's really low down and barely anyone can see it. It's nice to know they went to the trouble of making it look like it transforms, even if it actually doesn't. Articulation is pretty alright. It feels like a lot more than the Studio Series version, when in reality it's pretty much the same. I just wish the tail had more, as there's joints in there that allow for rotation at the back. The problem is, it locks in place with this protrusion, so even though it's literally using a hold that would typically become the waist swivel, it forces itself to remain stationary. Hardly anything to get too fussed over though. Really, here cutie. I'd even go as far as saying more so than my proper Legends Grimlocks in my collection. He's not the best Blocky I own, but unlike Snarl, I actually feel something from this one. I actually have a desire to keep this one around. It's just unfortunate that this one was also a duplicate of my purchases. Wait, hang on, that's not unfortunate at all.
Pretty, shiny, shiny.
Through my own sheer dumb luck and not through anything provided by Blockees themselves, I somehow ended up with the chase version of this fine fellow. I just grabbed an extra box on the way to a memorial service on the 20th of last month, and he was just there. God damn, I know I tend to be very lucky, but it still blindsides me. Yeah, this is pretty much just the previous Grimlock with a metallic coat. There are extra accessories he comes with, and they are kinda neat, but honestly, if you want a metallic Grimlock, you could probably cover off the tamper-graphed pieces with masking tape and give it a spray. Though, I suppose part of the charm is having the chase version for the rarity, and it does look lovely. The silver is some of the loveliest I've seen on a figure recently, and the gold is almost on the level of chrome. Whatever they're using on this thing looks lovely. It also has the side effect of making the mechanical detail look infinitely crisper. I'm noticing stuff like the cross pattern on the legs way more, or the rivets on the hands and collar. Hell, the Warpaint grooves make him look actually menacing now instead of cute and cuddly. There's also red on the inner frame, which looks loveliest of all, but you can barely see it with everything else covering it up. Would have loved this stuff to be more visible, but at the end of the day, he is a Grimlock, and as such, he has to follow a preset character design. Speaking of the red though, the eyes are a different color. This may bother some people, but personally, I'm fine with either. I think this is the Dinobot I'm going to keep around. The regular one is great and all, but it just has nothing on this. The only thing that would make this perfect is a clear neck piece, though that's always been a personal preference of mine. And I don't think it's feasible with these sorts of model kits. There haven't been many clear Blocky sets they've done, and when they do, it's usually a convention exclusive or some shit. Either way, to steal another YouTuber's catchphrase, shiny thing good.
Stop stealing my shit!
Sorry.
You better be!
Here are some examples of scrunklies.
I suppose they couldn't stick with making standard robots forever. It's a new movie, so of course they're going to be roped into advertising for it. It just makes marketing sense. They've actually overhauled the entire design system to make them work. You've got a bunch of new frame pieces, such as redesigned thighs, new standardized feet, angular waist pieces to fit into the movie stylization, and even new pre-assembled elbow and knee joints. Not only are these far more sturdy, but you don't have to worry about chipping your nail or some shit putting these tiny pieces together. Other than that though, the assembly is pretty similar to what's come before. Now, for the Galaxy class lineup, you can pretty easily split them into two key groups. You got the downscales of the transforming robots from the films, and, more importantly, you've got the cogless bots. One thing you'll notice from the film is that those without transformation cogs are given very specific stylizations. Weak-ass limbs and bigger heads. They're very child-coded, and many media analyzers have made comparisons to Sentinel's Rule and child labor, so it likely does serve a narrative purpose. Point is, though, Blockees has a very specific style it typically goes for, and that style is pretty much the same. These don't feel like Blokees doing a stylized take on cogless bots. They just feel like the cogless bots. Coupled with the fact that they're basically perfectly scaled with Studio Series Deluxes purely by accident, and you have the greatest unintentional success you could imagine. Of course, most of them are fairly simple design-wise. Cyanide and Hound are pretty much the same thing with different heads, right down to the shared accessories. They all get the excavation gun because they're striking a chord. Wait, no, that's the wrong spelling of minor. The sculpting we do have is quite nice though. I love the way the torso folds around the cog cavity, using multiple pieces to do so. They're able to do this by reallocating the piece count for what would normally be the backpack, and I think that's really neat. And much like the better Constructicons, they use the inner torso with tampergraphs to create some really cool layering effects. Also love the leg detailing. Not sure how to describe it, it just looks really nice. Wheeljack's also pretty neat, and he does go a lot harder on his unique parts. He feels really different compared to the others, as most of his armor has been overhauled. The head is alright, though I'm not that partial to it over the more classic design, though I suspect that's a me thing. The legs are done very well, perhaps too well. They've got so much paint and tampergraphs on show that it kinda distracts you from everything else. Like the shaping and other details are really cool, but it's a smidge difficult to notice it all. There's subtle stuff like the midriff section that sorta looks like it came right out of the Behold Galvatron scene, and I love how they gave him his ranking badge on his collar, but it's a little hard to notice with how crazy everything is waist down. But hey, first world problems, right? Weirdly enough, I think Bumblebee might be the weakest of the wave. There's a real cheapness to his plastic that I haven't really experienced with the other figures. Even the worst ones from the last video. He's got an entirely new assembly for the feet, but they just end up looking too big, kinda like clown shoes. The face sculpt kinda looks weird. Blokees has mostly fixed their weird head issues since Wave 3 onwards, but this seems almost a return to that style. I think it might be the lips or maybe the dead eyes, but he kinda looks like one of those aliens from Steven Spielberg's AI, Artificial Intelligence. Spoiler alert for a 2-decade-old movie, I guess. And that torso, just no. It's as if they were putting black panel lining directly onto yellow, which is already a big mistake, but then it's not even following the existing details, so it ends up looking even worse. I know as an amateur gunplay... No, Microsoft Word, it's putting gunplay in there. No, Microsoft Word, I never mean gunplay, I mean gunpla, you idiots. I know as an amateur gunpla builder, I've made that coloring mistake many times, but after seeing this, I'm probably deterred forever.
I will say though, it's kind of funny that as I was making this video,
Toy Hacks literally announced a set for the cogless bots, and it does make Bumblebee look a lot better, but I'm not sure I'm really gonna bother because, you know, rule of upgrading figures you like, not fixing figures you don't. I don't know, I'm 50-50 on it. At least Orion looks good. He probably has the most tampergraphing out of all of this wave. The torso just keeps going and going and going, and it turns out really well with the bronze highlights. Shame they skipped the rank badge though, slight missed opportunity. At least it makes up for it though with a really cool black outlining around the chest. I think this is what they were going for with Bumblebee, it just didn't quite come across right. Really, my main criticism is the face. It's fine, but it's a little elongated. From certain angles it looks like Woody from Toy Story, the actual Woody, not that weird creepy meme out of Japan back in 2010. He's actually got a friend in you, it's not a euphemism. But aside from that, they're pretty good, ignoring Bumblebee. They serve a really neat function and offer the same level of playability the other Galaxy class figures have. Rumor has it we're supposed to be getting another wave of these, and I hope we do because they make really nice companion pieces. Unfortunately, this only accounts for half the wave. The other half... Look, I get it, but at the same time, I just don't get it. Optimus Prime, Megatron, Steve, and Sentinel Prime are, in essence, Blockeified versions of the main cast. Yes, Steve included. We love him. Thing is, I don't particularly think it works for most of them. Prime is easily the best with his lovely face sculpt, awesome Matrix. Hell is with Microsoft Word at the moment. I just want to write this. Awesome Matrix tampergraph, fantastic accessories, and swish vibe. He even has a metallic finish on the smokestacks, thighs, and forearms, and this isn't the chase version. This is right out of the normal box, and he still looks resplendent. I guess it makes sense that they put the most effort into this one, but here's the thing. I'm just not feeling the cute factor with this. Since Blokees doesn't have full control over the aesthetic like they normally do, it just feels like a semi-chibi version of something vaguely familiar instead of a proper ground-up intentional design. And that's the best of the bunch. The others take it even further down. Megatron looks fine and all, but he's lacking a lot of that tampergraph brilliance I've seen with the other ones. And I have to wonder, why isn't this D16? Are they saving that version for a later wave? Instead we get this sort of middle ground Megatron that a lot of people don't tend to associate with the character. Nice that they included the decal, wonky positioning and all, but it feels like the rest of the design misses out on a lot of key tampergraphing that made me love the first few waves. It's fine, but there's just not a lot to say about him other than the weapon storage. Yes, you may notice they've made a change change to the forearms. The weapons now all have to be underslung, and I don't like it. It doesn't affect most of the bots, but when it does, it makes posing really difficult. This cannon is pretty cool, but Megatron just can't use it properly. Steve suffers arguably even more, where his wrist-mounted blasters blend in with everything else. Not that he needs any help, he's pretty bloody bland as is. From what little we've seen of the trackers in the film, they actually have some subtle differentiation between the inner frame and the outer armor. Differentiation completely lost with this rendition. There's a lot of detail here, but I can't really see any of it. I want a closer look at that layering on the torso, but the camera can't even focus on it. What am I to do? There's also the feeling that he's trying to break out of his own price point. A lot of parts, like the gun and the backpack, just feel hollow and undercooked. The wings feel like they should be a lot more sturdy, but they end up being really thin and waffled. That feeling feels a lot stronger with Sentinel, though. He is just begging to be freed of this price point. The plastic and paint are the best out of the wave, with the metallic blue and the resplendent gold decorating the whole thing. You get extra paint on the swords, which they could have easily skipped, and even dedicated kneecap pieces. Like, this is a Legion-priced figure. Damn! I acknowledge the effort put in here. I acknowledge that they wanted to go all out at this price point. But that price point really feels like it's holding this design back. Again, with this particular aesthetic, it doesn't really mesh with the Blokees' proportional stylings. The head looks out of place, the shoulders too small, the torso too squished. It's so close to feeling purposeful, yet it just falls flat. The wings feel truncated. They're so luscious in their gold and crisp detailing. But what good is all of that when you can barely see them from behind the rest of the body? Sentinel Prime is a regal thing that flourishes in figures that are able to go all out. Something both mainline versions seem to have issues with. The idea behind this toy is fundamentally opposed to that. I think it's commendable giving people an affordable Sentinel for your desk, but I don't think this was the way to go about it. Given the stylization concessions, Blokees' Galaxy lineup is far better suited to the cogless than these four. I'm not even sure I'll keep them around after this. They're not bad, don't get me wrong, but they're stuck between two worlds, and setting them free does a lot better.
Thank you for my pornography!
See what I mean? See how far they're able to go when they're free from restrictions? Sentinel Prime was the first of the four I built, and despite being the weakest, is still pretty good. The head sculpt is pretty much on the money. Maybe it's a little squished, but it's leagues above Bumblebee in the Galaxy Wave. I love the metallic plastic and paint they use to pick out all the specific deets. It just hits right in the way the Chug versions haven't. In fact, the cool thing about all of these is that they have truly gorgeous metallic finishes. This is exactly what I wanted from the Studio Series versions. Optimus Prime played with the idea, but the rest sorta gave up, and it's a real shame. If Bayverse cars can do metallic finishes whilst still paying licensing fees, I don't see why the one cast can't do the same. Doubly so when again, these kits all sit around the deluxe price point. Blokees can do it. What's your excuse? I love the layering effects he's got all around his body. These kits do really well building armor on top of armor on top of armor, and this is no exception. I never actually realized so many of the screen model details works this way. It's really opened my eyes to the subtleties ILM included. Even the back goes hard, which in the context of Blokees makes sense, but then you take a step back and it's insane. And the wings. This is what the wings needed to be. Wilder, this is one of the few cases that shows how resplendent they are. Like, I enjoy the mainline one, but it just doesn't hit the same. And why isn't the Studio Series one metallic? Like, what the f***? Of course, the accessory game is pretty cool, with the dual blades that... Wait, was this a Dark of the Moon reference this whole time? Holy sh**. You also have a bunch of alternate parts to mimic his powering up in the final act of the movie, and...
Motherfucker. What the hell? The side of his head just snapped clean off. I didn't even bang it or anything. It just kind of snapped off. It just fell the f*** off. I don't even know what to do with that. Okay, that is a bit of an issue. How thin is that? That is really thin and wibbly. Jesus Christ, I did not expect that to happen. I'm not going to put the mask on because that does seem like a bit of an issue.
I think the feet feel a bit unfinished. I've never been a big fan of the design, but overall, I think it's a nice display feature. And speaking of nice display features, I genuinely love the bases they come with. The previous three also had them, but I never really talked about them as they were just sorta there. Here, with the crystalline surroundings, these go hard. It does have a bit of jank under the hood, though. There's things here that definitely could have been improved. The hands kinda look ugly, as part of needing to allow the sword to fit in. I think these could have been designed a lot better. Maybe with the gun- Are you kidding me? Damn it, Microsoft words! I think these could have been designed a lot better. Maybe with a Gunpla style removable fist cover or a Studio Series style split on the blades themselves. Maybe they couldn't fit it in the parts count budget, but I'm not sure some of these alternate parts were that necessary anyway. Secondly, the wings love to pop off. They're still using those clear plastic ball joints, which to this day I wish they'd move away from. They also don't really hold onto the ball joint cuts that well. It might be that the finish on the wings isn't playing nice with the tolerances, but they're very loose as is. And I'm not sure how to fix it without potentially causing breakage issues. The arms also have this really cool new joint system that doesn't quite work. For the most part, the articulation is identical to previous classic class figures, but now because of these shoulder pads, they've added these new outward shoulder hinges. They almost work, but this causes a really bad cut in the sculpt with how low it is. I think just having the shoulder armor be a separate piece would have worked better here, or at least putting a cut higher, which is actually what Megatron ended up doing to a much more successful effect. And finally, the proportions are really goofy. The head is really sunken into the torso, making him look hunchbacked. The torso is better than the Galaxy class version, but it almost looks overweight with the extra bulk below the pecs. And by God, why are his thighs so short? I get that the joint's tucked in there, but there had to be a better way to hide it instead of shifting the panels up. This is far from a bad figure. There's a lot to love here. It's just got a few blemishes here and there that aren't present on the other figures. Though arguably, those blemishes do make him more interesting. The leader one is all around a far more solid figure, but consequently, there isn't a lot to say about her. In essence, she looks like she walked straight off the screen, metallic finish and all. Said finish doesn't quite go as hard as Sentinel or Megatron, likely because the fuchsia plastic doesn't work as well with the finish, but proportionally and aesthetically, I basically have no notes. Perfect sculpting, perfect color breakup that I never noticed in the film, brilliant head sculpt, even if the eyes stare into your soul. She's a figure I unironically find myself posing randomly on time off. Not that I have time off this month because the gun she comes with is a smidge oversized, probably because it was designed for Optimus Prime and reused for her, basically unchanged. But I guess that's lore accurate, so I don't really see an issue with that. Really, my one complaint is that the fist guards never stay on straight. That's it. That's my one complaint. Fantastic figure all around. Just not fantastic in an interesting way. I wish I had more to say. Sort of the same with Megatron. Great figure, but not something I can really point out as worthy of note. Fantastic head sculpts, great proportions, awesome metallic finish. Seriously, this coat of paint is really what makes these figures, and it really highlights what was missing from the Chug outings. You also finally get to see how the cutout shoulders work when they're done properly, since they now line up with the sockets themselves. Looks funny with the tiny gun on his left arm, though. Funny in a ha-ha, goofy-ah way, not a bad way. Honestly, I'm kind of surprised that there aren't that many red pieces included in the builds. In retrospect, it makes sense. It's just not a character design that would need it, but when assembling it, yeah, it is a bit weird. The red does bring the posing to life, though. These all share very similar posing amounts, same as the last three. Hence why I haven't gone into detail. And it all works exceptionally well. You even get extra flaps above the feet to allow more movement below. This guy is really easy to pose. Getting him into something badass is effortless. Gripes are really minor with him. Again, not that type of minor. Basically, the fists are too big and the gun is too small. That's it. Boo Ooh, such horrible things to be frustrated over. Wah. Am I wrong in saying this is probably the best representation of this character design? I mean, there isn't much competition. Mainline doesn't have one. Studio Series looks fine, and YOLO Park, okay, honestly, I don't actually know. Basically, he's the best, and not just by default. He'll likely remain that way unless Takara makes one of their commander-ish leaders to go with their prime, which sadly probably won't happen. But I can still dream. But from the outset, he just oozes the character from the film. He makes a statement on your desk, even in a standard pose, and that's really amazing. You even get hidden cog detail by removing the chest. That's pretty cool, and I wish Sentinel Prime did the same thing, though given the complexity of his torso, I sort of see why they didn't. Though, history seems to be repeating itself from the last video, because Optimus Prime easily takes the cake here. And it's a rich chocolate mud cake with perfect icing, because this motherfucker is sexy. The amount of shine on this thing is insane. You'd be forgiven for thinking this thing is sort of like a Chase version if you'd never handled the Chase figure before. Fortunately, they're not pulling an MMC with this. Though, it does actually carry over the axe fading from the Galaxy class Chase version, which I think is pretty neat. I'm afraid the ball joints aren't compatible though, for those wanting to swap. Also, again, he weirdly doesn't use a lot of red pieces, which is insane because the red on show is amazing. Sometimes less is more, I guess. The head sculpt is right on the money, though you can definitely see the big head style a bit more on these. The Transformers 1 character designs sort of naturally have bigger heads than most series aesthetics, so it translated very well in the last three, but here you can tell it's Blokees. The eyes shine wonderfully though, and even the Matrix lights up, which is awesome. The torso also opens up to give us a closer look, though unfortunately for some it isn't removable. I'm fine with it though. To be honest, I've been getting sick of constant matrices. They're accurate, sure, but when every prime has them, they kinda lose their luster. The gun actually looks properly proportioned now, which makes sense as it was probably made specifically for this design. And he's finally a figure that just works without any fist issues, when you basically end up only using one because of the axe. Oh, the irony. I think the legs might actually be my favorite part though. The layering is insane. Combining the lovely blue from Sentinel, then the awesome silver from Megatron, and finally the divine dirty metal from the Galaxy class version, yeah, this might be the best thing from this entire video. I genuinely thought it was going to be absurdly difficult to give us something better than 07 Prime. That was just something else. F me dead. This is some next level shit. But I guess that brings us back to the original question. What happens when Blokees is forced to relinquish control of their stylization? How do the toys fare? Well, keep in mind, some of the toys don't do too well even with that stylization incorporated. But for the ones that do fail because of the conundrum, it does feel like they're fighting an uphill battle. And I think the large figures are able to navigate that space a lot more effectively, partly because they have more room to breathe, but partly because Transformers 1 designs are very similar to what Blokees already does. There are instances where this works really well, and instances where they feel really constricted. It just really depends on the circumstance, but I guess it boils down to trust a company that has done a lot of good to continue to do a lot of good, unless the writing on the wall says otherwise. So far it hasn't, outside of some probable interns copy-pasting bios from TF-Wiki instead of writing their own bios. But I honestly think that was a genuine mistake, and it'll probably be ironed out by the next few releases. Part of the initial charm of the first set has certainly worn off, but these are still doing great things in the non-transforming Transformers paradigm. I still think they should return to the style they know best, or at least do more cogless figures, but whatever path they choose, I'm sure it'll do well. Just give us Devastator. Come on, please, I'm begging you. You know, it's funny, after you collect for a while, you kind of realize why you like the things you like, and why you don't the things you don't. For a while, I thought I wasn't particularly a fan of non-transforming Transformers, but then I built some brick sets and then much later Blokees, and I realized that wasn't necessarily the case. But I still don't like most cases, even though these are really fun. Why is that? I think the recent Action Edition Megatron put into perspective why. It's a connection with the figure itself, not the character, but rather the experience. With a normal Transformer, I engage with the conversion, but with Blokees, it's the build. This thing is fantastic, don't get me wrong, but I think the biggest thing for me is that I built it. I was there when it was put together piece by piece. I can't pick this up without remembering the process of assembly. It's the same reason why I'm sort of okay with Gunpla, but a lot of other standalone figures, not so much. It's just interesting that my opinion doesn't change over time, but instead recontextualizes itself. Probably helps that this is one of the best non-transforming Megatrons on the market. Full silver and red zones on the legs should be a staple. Miss me with that toon shit. This is where it's at. The rules that apply to transforming Transformers and non-transforming Transformers are very different. With your average off-the-shelf Cybertronian, transforming itself is often enough of a gimmick. Sure, they bring in gimmicks from time to time, but the toy line remains constant thanks to the tactile nature of the hobby. Transformers transform. Big whoop. But remove that factor and you have to fill in the gaps. Perhaps accuracy is the big kicker, or maybe cross-compatibility, or mayhaps a specialized aesthetic. You've got to have a draw for both fans and average consumers, something you can't normally get with standard mainline or masterpiece releases. Coincidentally, all three of these examples are things Blokees delivers in spades. It's no secret that the drop of this new toy line was carefully calculated, and it worked. Blokees are popping the off in the fandom. People can't get their mitts off these. However, it's important to note that this big beginning is sort of like the post-war Japanese economic boom. It might seem like a miracle with no end in sight, but eventually it does have to wear off. I always try to answer something nagging at me with these sorts of videos, but nevertheless, I'm curious. Has the Blokees magic worn off? And if not, will it at some point in the near future? Greetings, Cybertronians. I'm DrLockdown, and today's diagnosis returns us to the ever-changing Blokees landscape. Sometimes it's hard to look at the bigger picture without stepping back and seeing how far you've come. And sometimes you realize the picture's already done. But, well, that's something to discuss later. One thing that's not required at this point, however, is the explanation on what Blokees are. Because at this point, I've done 2 videos explaining them, 3 if you count the cancelled Legiondary episode due to audio issues. I do hope that sees the light of day someday, though. Either way, no point dilly-dallying. Hit it! Special editions. Even if they're not that special in the grand scheme of things, offering little to no bonuses over the standard release, it's still a good option to have. And that's where the shining versions of the standard Galaxy class figures come in. A beefed up price point with LEDs, nuts, and extra accessories. From a distance, it might seem like a whole lot of nothing for a massive price increase, a la SS86 Springer. Oh hi there, most disappointing figure of last year. But they're actually only a couple of bucks more than the standard version. Value-wise, this is pretty good. They also use the same LED system as the earlier classic class figures, right down to the shaking to activate gimmick. Not the best system, but for an earlier release, it's alright. And also, apparently they glow under a black light. I don't know if I actually have a UV light laying around somewhere to demonstrate, so that's a problem for future DrLockdown. And yes, these figures did release far earlier than the more recent figures I've covered. So really they only just showed up locally at the end of last year. Weird time to show up, not that I'm complaining. And yes, this assortment was purchased locally, not provided by Blokees themselves. Blokees money is practically an Ouroboros at this point, not that I actually get paid for these. The poster brainchild of this wave, and the one I was the most excited for, was the Optimus Prime. Despite featuring in my mini-series of shorts criticizing the unfettered amount of G1 Optimus Primes released over the course of last year, this release was actually one I took a passing interest in. It was at the least the one out of the set I wanted to get, if nothing else. And oh, what's that? Oh wow, it's Abundance. God damn it. Duplicates aside, this is a really good release. It's probably the most unique of the Galaxy class figures they've ever done. They really put the extended budget to use, even if it's only a couple of extra bucks at retail. Usually you'd just get a torso and shoulders, but this Prime also gets practically entirely new legs, new feet, and even a new waist section. If it weren't for the oversized head, he'd probably not even look like a Blokees release. Not in a bad way, mind you, and neither is an insult to the Blokees aesthetic. I adore the face sculpt. It perfectly captures the wideness of the G1 toy, while still adding just enough angles to make it fit in. If I'm being honest, I kinda prefer it to the Legacy Deluxe. They use that trick to reallocate the backpack budget to the front to give him a dedicated grill piece. I'd assume the chase version works even better with a metallic finish, but the standard one works just as good. I really like the interpretation of the Matrix printed over the windows and letting the light shine through. And the light does work really well here. With a lot of earlier Blokees releases, the LEDs were sort of hit or miss. Here though, it works right out of the gate. The waist section works quite well too, though the yellow paint isn't great. What is it with Primes having iffy paint on their crotch sections recently? I get yellow is a difficult color to do, but come on. The legs absolutely make up for it though. The assembly is awesome, with all the new feet and extra wheels. I really like that they made the joints red so that they don't seem out of place. Ever since the Constructicons, I've always wanted to see them experiment with other joint colors, and this is a great example of that. The wheels even ball joint out to the side to allow full hip articulation, which I think is awesome. Honestly, I'd say these were done way better than the Deluxe, where the waist is properly cut with the rest of the body. I get that it doesn't have to transform, so it's got an advantage, but do you think between two versions of this thing, one of them would have a proper waist cut? Not shitting on the Deluxe, mind you. It's still one of my favorite figures of last year. Just acknowledging when the Blockee does it better. I do think the feet could use some more coloration though, especially given they rely on tampografts anyway, but they will do okay. Some toy accurate details on the forearms would also be nice, but perhaps it just wasn't possible. They did paint the lights above the torso though, which is a very nice touch. Would have preferred forearm detailing, but still, it's some nice attention to detail. Overall, it's a delightful figure and probably one of the best they've done at this scale. My only real gripe, aside from the feet decals, is that the shoulders don't particularly match the rest of the body, but I realize there's only so much you can do with the Blockee skeleton. Other than that, yeah, this rules. I'd likely like it even more if Legacy hadn't just released one of their best Primes ever in exactly the same style, which itself was a 1-2 punch with the Mattel Creations Hot Wheels version. A not so great release, but still one that contributed to me having my fill on this design. That's not this figure's fault though, that's more so the year it released in. I mean, I did 3 shorts on the absurdity of it all. Even at the anniversary of the franchise, we got way too many G1 Primes last year. Now, Prime makes sense for this lineup of Herbie Hancock's Light Me Up. Just put those high beams in the window and Bob's your estranged uncle with a very suspicious flask collection in his cabinet. And of course, Soundwave makes sense, giving you Light Up the Torso and Bada Bing Bada Boom Laserbeak Eject Operation Migu Rave. But I didn't get Soundwave no matter how much I tried. And the ones I did get, it does seem like they're stretching a bit for what they're trying to do. Like Sideswipe, for instance. He's not bad in any sense, but he does make me wonder why he's in this specific lineup. The new pieces he comes with aren't anything particularly beyond what a standard Blockee provides. The torso is lovely, all devastation-y and painted with care. Lovely to get some nice crisp Autobot symbols after, well, you know. The new legs are also pretty good, though I don't think they feel very Countach-esque. It's teetering on the edge of third-party syndrome, with mechanical detail just for the sake of mechanical detail. The only thing even remotely close is the wheels. It'd be fine if the stylization had a point, like many of the Blockees releases did, but I just don't see that point here. And it's not like there aren't elements that do have a point on this thing. The forearm shields are pretty cool. They're a really nice interpretation of the Sunbow model's door use, doing their own thing but owning that own thing. I'm not sure they're particularly necessary, but I like that they're here. I also like that they included the rocket launcher. It's a feature often skipped, and it's cool to see. Maybe this is why it was put into the price point. There's a bunch of extra bits and accessories that just wouldn't fit in a standard release. I mean, he also has his backpack, which is pretty extensive for the standard $10 brackets, and before you ask, yes, it does work with Prime. Not that it really accomplishes much. Now, in the original script, I put a note that said normal Prime, and for ages and ages, I couldn't figure out why I wrote that. Turns out it was a reminder for me to test it out on the first wave Blokees Optimus Prime. And yes, the two are in fact compatible. It does work as an okay accessory. I do think it sits a little bit low. Would have been nice if it was just a smidge higher. But hey, it's a nice little thing you can do with the two of them, if you want to, as a certain other reviewer would say. So that explains why he's here, but I still don't think he was a good fit. The LED in his chest just exists, but you can't see the damn thing because it's entirely opaque. They don't even work that well with the eyes anyway, not that I really care as it's got that classic early Blokees creepy face. Looks like perpetual baby face, sort of similar to a colleague I used to work with back at my old retail job. So ultimately, you got a blech head and an okay body in a price point where logically he makes sense, but emotionally he feels out of place. But in the words of Jeremy Clarkson,
still, could be worse.
Why is Beachcomber here? Is it so his eyes can light up? So he can come with an unpainted paradise parakeet? So he can have his golden lagoon hand? Folks, those aren't enough to justify a full Shining release. The light-up eyes don't even work that well in the first place. I've checked, they are functioning, unlike the Megatron from the first video. It's just, the piping doesn't work particularly well for this shade. But whatever, they're only like $3 more than the standard Galaxy class release. How does this fare as a normal Blockee? Well, honestly, pretty mediocre. He's just sort of a man of boxes with minimal paint and tamper graphs. I realize that's reasonably accurate for the character, but it just doesn't translate very well to Blockee form. A lot of that comes down to my own personal bias. I've always preferred my Beachies with a more flowing aesthetic. It's one of the big reasons why I prefer the Legacy version to the pot pie one, though I seem to be alone in that statement. This is closer to the toy version with a big blocky torso showing nothing but grey, and blue chunks that don't involve much mechanical detail. The shoulder wheels are nice, but far from engaging on any level. They couldn't even do something as simple as cast the parakeet in green plastic. That's like base level. This is supposed to be a special edition line. Did the budget get reallocated to other figures? I don't particularly have a lot to say on Beachcomber beyond he's a bit boring. How do you quantify boredom? How do you explain the intricacies of a figure where the main issue is that he doesn't have intricacies? He feels more like a stand-in for fans of the character than a solid release in his own right. Beyond being out of place in his own toy line, even more so than Sideswipe. Even the person I'm letting keep this, Cliffby, who in his own right is a massive Beachcomber fan, just sees this as a gap filler for the Beachcomber shrine. When even the biggest Beachcomber fan on the planet can't find much to enjoy, you know that spark is missing. Fortunately, the final figure I got fits the line a lot better. Shining figures work when you can actually see the chests glow, at least in my opinion. I'm actually surprised with this one, as I didn't expect to like it particularly much. The other Dinobots didn't exactly wow me, so I figured it would be an easy sell-off. But fortunately, this won't be. It'll be a difficult sell-off because I got stuck with 2 again. But blind pack nonsense aside, I vibe with this way more than the previous 2. Not as much as Prime, but still a reasonable amount. The head sculpt both looks great and pipes the light exceptionally. For once, or I guess twice, it feels like he really takes advantage of the gimmick. Because of the way it's designed, it does sit really high above the torso and gives the impression of a terribly long neck, but it's not that bad. And hey, the torso it crowns is quite lovely. Not only is it crisp, but it gets the yellow paints bang on the money. Now this is a good example of yellow paint done right. Suck it! The 2 recent Optimus Primes on the review platter. The LED also works a treat on the clear torso, though it doesn't really come up on camera very well. Probably because the transparent plastic is neon as f***. Printing is awesome though, I'd say better than Optimus. They've actually included a good chunk of printing all around. With the toy style RGB on the shins and even some faux claws on the forearms. Maybe toy style decals would have been possible on Prime after all. The rest is pretty stock standard, save for the backpack. It works quite well, even if it has a tendency to fall off pretty easily. Might just glue it in there once this review is done. But yeah, not a lot to say about Grimlock either, but this time for a much better reason. He's, overall, just a solid Blockee, elevated simply by the LED gimmick. Rather than there not being a lot to say because it's boring, there's not a lot to say because it's good in all the ways Blockees usually are. I'll happily take that over the alternative. He even has a nice accessory loadout with ye old gun and ye old sword and even 2 different eye colors. Personally, I'm more into the red one as it plays better with the LED, but hey, options are good. And it's nice that I can at least derive some use from accidentally getting 2. Well, I say accidentally, but with blind packs that's always part of the intent, so that you buy more. Again, I was not expecting to like Grimlock as much as I did. Honestly, I've just been biding my time until I can sell off the rest. I've got the 86 ones already, and the Legacy Dinobots have been great desk toys as well. Even on the disappointment range, that's taken up by New Age. I've got my Dinobot fix, but seriously, this is a wonderful surprise. He doesn't even need to go alongside anyone anyway, save for maybe the Chase Dinosaur version. He's good, and Prime good. These 2 make the lineup worth it for me. The rest can just go somewhere, I don't know. Look, this whole wave is a bit of a hodgepodge. It's a line that feels like they grabbed whoever wouldn't fit at retail, and even then, some of their decisions seem a bit dubious. None of these are bad in the slightest, it's just, some of these you wonder why they exist. I know a lot of that boils down to the fact that the better choices from this wave are the ones that passed me by, but even then, it does seem a little pointless at times. Still, apparently there was another Shining wave before this, and it appears to be even more moot compared to the originals. What's that phrase again?
Still, could be worse.
Fortunately, the next wave is indeed looking a lot better, but as I've already experienced a lot of these in their standard form already, I don't particularly see the need to double up. Even on the awesome powered convoy homage, I'm just not that excited considering I didn't particularly enjoy the original. Still, I think it was all worth it for the toy style Prime. This has genuinely become one of my favorite releases of theirs. Not on the same level as the Legacy Deluxe from last year, but a fun little novelty that I'm glad to have around. Just not glad enough to keep both copies on hand. So is the curse of randomization. This wave has me confused. On one hand, it brings me right back to what I was looking for after the lukewarmity with the Shining stuff. But on the other, it's all over the place. Things that I thought would be super exciting just fall flat, and elements that I didn't expect to like really surprised me. It's not a bad wave by any means. Everything here is at least adequate, but it just has my brain like Roy Kent. It's here, it's there, it's every where. The lineup is sort of IDW themed, sort of not. Dropping an assortment of wildly different interpretations so that I guess everyone's got something to be into. On one hand, it's potentially a pain for folks buying the whole wave just for one figure, but on the other, literally every company engages in this sort of behavior. Nothing new, and nothing egregious. Surprisingly, a lot of the hype behind the wave was actually in relation to Sunstreaker of all things. Yeah, interestingly, a lot of people were clamoring for a licensed third-party figure of the guy, unofficially pitting Blokees and YOLO Park against each other to see who would release theirs first. I guess Earthrise doesn't exist apparently, even though it's literally getting a reissue. Oh yeah, New Age also announced theirs. Looks pretty ace, gotta say. One thing I will praise right off the bat is how they've carried across the pre-assembled joints from the Transformers 1 wave. I'm really glad these have stuck around beyond the capsule line. You'll also notice that several of those specialized pieces make their return as well, since Blokees now has a more extensive pool of parts to draw from. They haven't leaned on that for Sunstreaker though. It's got quite a few multi-layered parts to help fill out the design. The shoulders are way more extensive than I anticipated, and they come across really well. I never actually considered this style of shoulder that iconic, but looking at it closer now, I might have to reconsider my view. The torso is delightful, taking full advantage of the classic tamper-graphing awesomeness. See, Devastation Prime? This is how you do cell shading. The head that sits atop it is okay, albeit a smidge uncanny in the face department. Nowhere near as bad as their early releases, but still something to take note of. I really dig the backpack. It's nice and compact and oh so shiny. Of course, a lot of this is easy thanks to the lack of transformation, but it still looks really nice. Even the shins look snazzy, going off in their own style direction, but thankfully committing to it properly. Thankfully, it doesn't seem like aimless stylization for the sake of stylization. While the early releases were still stylized pretty effectively, this one thankfully takes it a step further and refines the aesthetic. Though fortunately, even some of the older returning designs get revitalized enough to do a lot better. Shiny Glass Ratchet is an interesting choice to say the least. Seems like something they've been slipping in a healthy dose of the continuity, not that I'm complaining. Now, while I didn't mention it in my original review, I unfortunately fell out hard with the original Ironhide. After taking a closer look, I quickly realized he was my least favorite release they've done, even in the face of on-camera breakages on figures such as Sentinel Prime. By the time I realized the video was almost complete and going back and changing things last minute would have taken too long. Just, I don't like him very much. And yet, everything with him seems fixed here. Well, almost everything, but enough to make me forgive the design. I'm still not a fan of the curving on the chest, but it's a lot better now with the new flatlining tamper-graphing. I think the Shattered Glass Deco has always worked better with an opaque chest when compared to his original versions. The head sculpt seems fixed, though I'm not sure how. As far as I can gather, it's basically the same as it ever was. But I don't know, something about it here seems sharper. Maybe it's the colors that are doing it for me. This deco has always f***ed, and here is no exception. Part of me does wonder what he'd look like in the original comic stylings with the Aqua Surgeon gown style, but at this stage, the color's already too far well established, so it wouldn't make much sense. Beyond that, everything else is pretty stock standard. But that standard is quite solid itself. Nice tamper graphing on the legs, snazzy shoulder pads with purple highlights, decent color balancing, what more could you ask for? Well, personally, I prefer the turquoise to be a bit more neon, like the Earthrise Selects version from a few years back, but the shade we have isn't bad by any means. It's still a solid blocky, not one that I'm particularly frothing over, but one that's definitely given me a reason to keep it around. Wish I could say the same for Dirge though, not because it's bad, if anything it's the opposite, he's fantastic. But I've promised to give him to Cliffby along with Beachcomber. Not gonna lie though, I'm sort of regretting my decision, because f*** me dead this is sexy. The blue is truly divine, deep and lush. There's even evidence that a lot of it is actual paint, which, wow, talk about commitment to the bits. They've redone the torso to be closer to the Sunbow model, which itself was redone from Starscream's design to be closer to the toys, by virtue of being a Season 2 design. Combined with the delightful tamper graphing, it really leans into the chunkier vibe. Good to see this style done justice, even if it's not on a transforming toy, sadly. The legs do look a smidge staggered, with the slender kneecaps not quite lining up aesthetically with the clips for the wings, but it's way better than many of the alternatives. And the wings themselves are honestly amazing, with the metallic gold returning from Sentinel Prime and some crisp tamper graphing tying the whole thing together. I'm not sure why these rotate as they don't have to transform, but hey, options are good. I do wish the back wings were a bit more sturdy though. They feel a little bit like the wings on Galaxy class Sentinel, floppy and out of place. I also wish they'd actually included the bomber missiles instead of the traditional null rays most Seekers gets, or whatever guns they're supposed to be called. Look, I know canonically Starscream is the only one who's supposed to have them, but when all the Seekers have the same guns, I'm gonna call them null rays. But my point is, most of the Conehead homages seem to skip them, and it's always bothered me. New Age got around this with this really cool slipcover method, and no one's taken inspiration from it. Without the shoulder wings, often the shoulders look bland and plain on the Coneheads, unless you bring in the bombs. This doesn't have that issue, but as a personal ick, I do find it a smidge disappointing they didn't go that extra mile. Either way though, although some areas are a smidge wibbly, he's still a cracking Seeker. Only reason he's moving on is because the resident Dirge and Beachcomber fanatic will get way more out of it than I ever would, and that's fair. Doesn't look like this fellow is very impressed with my judgment though. Not mad, just disappointed in me. Moving on, Wheeljack honestly surprised me with how stylish he was. I guess because the last one was kinda okay, I expected the new version to be the same. But no, this is actually really swish. It's weird, that's like 3 times I've expected to be bored with a Wheeljack and I've ended up loving it. Wait, no, I rebought the 2010 one, and now that it has fixed tolerances, I actually quite like it, so that makes 4. Should probably redo that original Wheeljack off video someday. United one's a bit naff though. Actually, both United ones. That is pretty good. Not super crazy with his mechanical detail, but damn fine with its tamper graphing. They use it to add so many extra flashes of color, even creating a faux glowing effect on the ears. Kinda wish more companies would do stuff like this. It's a really cool feature. Same deal with the torso. The tamper graphs really make it feel much more layered than it actually is. Bit jarring to see the unpainted blue on the sides though. Doesn't quite ruin the cohesion with the bottom window, but it is weird. Even the back is tamper graphed the f up, though I do think it would be a bit better served for the wings. The sculpting here is much more aimless, or I guess much less aimful. I don't know how grammar works. Point is they look weird, and maybe some paint would help with that. No complaints with the legs though, they just look great. They're wholly their own thing, not taking inspiration from anyone, but they have a firm sense of style, as does the rest of this. It's a bit more stylized than many Blockees before him, but I honestly think that works for him spectacularly. There's little tweaks I'd make, such as the paint on the shoulders and better wings, but overall it's a solid release. When stylizing a figure, it's important to know what you want to do and achieve it properly, something a lot of third-party releases fail with. Blockees has already done well on this with a lot of releases, but Wheeljack, I think he accomplishes it exceptionally well. Perhaps some of that style would have served the next member well though, because Kickback is just okay. He's easily the weakest of the set, though considering he's not even bad to begin with, that does say a lot about the quality of this wave overall. I don't know though, he's just sort of G1 with a Blockees filter over it. Like, he doesn't particularly have much of the crazy stylings the others have. The tamper graph work is a lot more reserved than I'm used to, even with some of their worst releases. It's still here, with plenty around the chest and legs, but it's very small and unnoticeable. He's a difficult figure to talk about because what can you say other than he's just average? The head sculpt is Kickback, I guess, as is his chest. They are absolutely going to make a shining version of this later down the line, mark my words. The included gun is cool, and the wings are at least more posable than the legacy version. In fact, overall I'd say he is far more engaging than that boredom fest of a figure. It's also really cool that they brought back the new feet and waist section seen in Transformers 1. But other than that, he's just okay, I guess. He's more so a representation of the character within the Blockee scale. Other than that, I don't see much point to him. I mean, he's practically outclassed by his own accessory. Yes, hail to the Boog, the creepy Boog. This thing has no articulation, cheap plastic, and wispy as paint. But damn it, I love him. He's just the perfect little bug to play with on your desk. And damn it, why wasn't this included in the Defender pack instead? It's a cool addition, but it's just tacked on to such a nothing figure. Massive Insecticon fans will probably love this thing to bits, but given the G1 Insecticons are some of the most boring figures of the era, not just dictated by me, but also by the G1 community at large, I don't know how many fans they truly have. Though I do find at least more interest with him than I do with the 2 swoops. That's not saying the 2 are bad or anything. Categorically, they are way better than Kickback could ever hope to be. But honestly, these are amazing Blockees figures that just aren't for me. From the get-go, I just haven't vibed with the Blockees Dinobots, save for Chase and Shining Grimlock. The rest here have just sort of been there, not really doing anything, which I guess is fine. Just not for me, but I can at least acknowledge they've done very well. Swoop closes out the team and is a pretty good closer. Not SS86 hype levels, but still, nice. The torso layering is really snazzy, combining wonderful mechanical detail, awesome tamper graphs, and killer layering of parts. Everything comes together in small bits, subtly, bit by bit. Eventually you get something that walks the line perfectly between slender and bulky, sort of a necessity for the Blockees aesthetic. Combined with the downward flowing legs, this guy is way higher on my enjoyment list than the others. Almost enough to make me want to keep him around. Almost. They've even added tiny little feet on his knees to sell the idea that he transforms. The yellow paint isn't exactly perfect, it's a little wispy, but hey, at least it's better than some previously discussed examples. The wings are also fantastic, employing similar layering and tapographing effects to the torso, though not quite on the same level. Lots of little flourishes and dents on show, sadly not double-sided, but still quite lovely. Really, the only part of the design that doesn't do it for me is the head. It's not bad, especially compared to several of the older releases, but to the rest of the design, it does feel pretty lifeless. I realize conceptually the Dinobots are a pretty derpy concept, but this just gives me nothing. And often, that's all it really takes to bring a figure down. A mediocre head sculpt can completely change the vibe of the package. And although I'm usually a little more lenient on such things, I think I'm feeling that here. And that's sort of the overall feeling I get from the dinosaur mode version, or I guess a pterosaur isn't quite a dinosaur, but you get the idea. With this one, I find it a lot more difficult to discern what it's missing, but something definitely is. It's certainly not effort, they've really gone all out here. More than any previously covered Dinobots, there are very few reused parts across the two. I think it's just the wings and the waist section here, that's it. The tapographing is as on point as it was previously, even incorporating a healthy dose of paint to help with certain coloring. They've even fixed the head sculpt, it's a wonderful blend of round and cuboid. I should love this thing, it's doing everything I could want, so why don't I? I think it's a combination of what I expect from Blokees and what I expect from a G1 swoop. I come into this design not expecting a realistic sort of dinosaur proportion set, but more so a block with wings. That feels appropriate for the design, the style, and even the continuity with the robot mode version. And yet, I'm just not afforded such here. The leggies and this torso, although accurate to what a pterosaur would actually look like proportionally, kinda do the design a disservice if you ask me. Of course, it might be because at this point I'm fairly Dinobotted out. That's 3 completed sets in the past 4 years. Enough is enough. I'm not going to call either of these bad, or any of the previous ones for that matter. It's just, even aside from the fact I'm honestly tired of this set of characters, they're just missing that special spark that lets them rise above the rest to greatness. Fortunately, the final 2 members are a lot closer to that spark, though sadly I don't think Megatron is quite there yet. Again, I think that a lot of his appeal sadly comes from the fact that he is a readily available and affordable IDW Megatron. Typically you get one, the other, or often neither. This fills that slot pretty successfully, albeit with some compromises. My biggest gripe would have to be the colors. This light stone grey just tends to wash out the details. Not sure how they could have fixed this without going full metallic, but it does feel a smidge undercooked here. Fortunately, the tampograph work makes up for it. The torso especially goes hard with the swirly wire of doom. And it's really cool to have a proper Autobot Megatron representation instead of half-assed stickers given to you as a consolation prize. There's also a hefty amount of paintwork on the shins too, and it looks really lovely. Kinda looks like ribbons from certain angles, but it still adds some lovely visual flair. And they even brought back the Transformers 1 feet. That's cool. But then the forearms clash with everything else since the aesthetic has overall been squared up. Plus the tapographs on the shoulders have been aligned really poorly, looking like sloppily applied stickers. And those eyes, they are way too big. It's cool this exists, it's nice that it lets you have this representation. You can even remove the fusion cannon to have either style, which shows commitment to getting the character right. But like, it's again missing that pizzazz. Better than the swoops, but still, I kinda wanted more from this. But then, we get to the crown jewel of this set, IDW Optimus Prime. And yes, this is in fact IDW, not War Within. People keep getting the two designs mixed up. The amount of times I've brought up the sign and people have confused what it's supposed to be is honestly getting annoying. This is War Within, this is IDW pre-war, and this is a shark. I swear I'm not an egg. This is the one chase version I was really hoping to get, and me, I'm excited to have it. This might just be the perfect blend of blocky sculpting and paintwork I've ever seen on a standard Galaxy class release. The metallic blue that envelops this thing is possibly the most resplendent I've seen in a very long time, perhaps only trumped by Chrome Pants McGee from Mattel Creations. If this was how shiny they made the blue on New Age powered Convoy, I'd probably be a lot more into them using the e-hobby colors over the original Diaclone ones. And yes, this is supposed to represent a single comic panel, not be a throwback, but come on. Is way cooler. You've got so many specialized pieces on the chest, honestly giving Shining Prime a run for his money. He's got specialized ball joints too, but they work pretty decently, placing him more on the Tarn side than the Magnus one. They've carefully picked out so many details on the grills, abs, and even the lights under the pecs. Those have to be the tiniest tapographs I've ever seen. The head sculpt is borderline perfect. I probably shrink in the middle crest a bit, but everything else works exceptionally. I don't even mind the eyes being really pale, really works for the design. Also, never realized until I took a closer look that it's actually asymmetrical. Cool little communications thingo on the cheek. Nice touch. The forearms have been given really cool tapographs too, and I am absolutely enamored with the burn patterns on the smokestacks. This shit is like Warhammer paint level, not standard retail shit. It's me sideways. This is amazing. Seriously, I have one gripe with this figure, and it's really minor. It's the guns. Well, not the guns themselves, but some of the paint choices. The color they've chosen for the chase version is delightful, with a wonderful holographic effect. I don't think I've ever seen this on a toy before. It's almost indescribable. So good thing these reviews are a visual experience. My only complaint is how they're designed. With how they fit onto the back, they also form the wheels on the shoulders. This means that without the paint, they become hard to differentiate from the rest of the body. They just sorta blend into the collarbones. Just a smidge of black paint here, and it'd be perfect, I'd say. It's pretty close to perfect as is. Still a top-tier Blocky regardless, and probably the biggest sigh of relief I've exhaled in relation to getting a specific chase model. It's genuinely amazing that one of the special editions I wanted was delivered to me this way. Fantastic luck. This is wonderful. Seriously, imagine not wanting awesome chase versions like this. Imagine deliberately swapping out for something worse. No, I can't think of anyone who would do that. But yeah, overall, a confusing wave, but still a good one. I don't think it had as many highs as the previous waves, but I'm still glad it's here. I don't know how much of it I'm really going to keep around, but the ones that will remain are at least pretty damn good. Especially that Optimus. Hot damn, this thing is sexy. I suppose, like the recent Wolfpack album, this here was just a matter of time. They're already halfway to being super deformed, why wouldn't they go the rest of the way and release a full line of cutie patooties? Well, I can think of one reason: general appeal. Chibi designs aren't exactly a massive draw for a lot of people. The standard Blockees proportions are reserved enough so that most collectors feel comfortable with at least owning a couple. Super deformed stuff? I've often seen people accuse it of being a franchise killer. This was what both intrigued me and concerned me going into this. Would they prove me wrong? Well, yes and no. While these have proven themselves significantly less popular than the other two primary releases, they have carved out a reasonable niche for themselves. And looking at most of the wave, they seem to be doing well. In essence, they're shrunken down, chibi-fied versions of the existing Blockees style. Despite 2 degrees of separation from existing Transformers characters, they do really well in translating all the important bits over. Even beyond the obvious stuff, they've added the lines from the forearms, recreated the feet, and got the waist section down pat. Even the articulation is basically the same, with very similar joints. They really just make the shoulders single jointed and make the elbows and knees balls instead of hinges and swivels, which are still perfectly serviceable, and the first 8 you get are still pretty nifty. I think Prime might have made the jump the most successfully, especially with that head. It's not accurate to the original, but it's wonderfully anime-esque and I adore it. I always love when the ears splay out to the sides a bit. It's a really cool reinterpretation. Probably why I like Star Convoy so much. The torso is basically a shrunken down version of the full-sized one, but they've done pretty well, even including the indents on the grille. They even managed to do the Autobot symbol outline nice and crisply, which really makes a certain previous review's topic look sad. Other than that, it's a pretty simple affair. Legs shrunken down but lacking paint, arms done well but also lacking paint, feet are basically the same. It's a chibi version of something we've already covered, and it's done pretty well. Not much to complain about given these things are like, what, the price of a tiny turbo changer? I'm not sure, they haven't really made it down under yet. You can get them off Show Z store for like $50 though, which translates to what, $6.25 each? That's like cheaper than Legion Legends used to cost back in 2007. Of course, sadly this time I did not get the chase version. There's actually 4 different chases you can get. 2 Primes, 2 Megatrons. Each is either just shiny or armored shiny, and Prime's armor has the Cybertron armor, which would have been really cool, but alas, I lucked out already, which I guess is alright. Did get the standard shiny Megatron chase though, and yeah, this metallic look would have really done wonders for the IDW version. Interestingly, he doesn't carry a lot of the Blockees balancing aesthetic, he just sort of falls into the chibi style. He looks more like he'd fit into one of those Takara Legends comics, back when they used to do an entirely new line of more inaccurate decos. I adore the face sculpt, with a subtle shit-eating smirk, tiny eyebrows picked out, and massive helmet forehead. The eye shape also works really well. In retrospect, that's probably what the actual problem with the IDW version was. The torso is a little more rounded out, but it still conveys the Walther chest nicely. While I do wish the fusion cannon was actually colored black instead of gang-colored with the fists and feet, it's still quite lovely. Bit thinner than you'd normally get, but I still think it works for the chibi design. Seems more precise, and makes the cool factor push through so it doesn't feel cutesy. Honestly, I'm feeling this way more in terms of proportions and color balance than the full-sized IDW rendition. Capped off with a lovely dedicated backpack, this is once again a pretty good release. 2 for 2. Can we do 3 for 3? Yes we can, with Shattered Glass Sideswipe. Huh, weird choice, but cool I guess. Probably opens the door for a more G1 style one later down the line, making people buy multiple waves. Kinda like how SG Sideswipe was a backdoor for Armada Wheeljack in mainline. Neat way to get it done. Won't work here though, as they've gone for the G1 styled head instead of the Armada one. Sculpt wise, this is pretty on the money again. He's significantly wider and shorter when compared to his wave mates, likely to accentuate the Lambo chest. I've always liked when he goes wider instead of the slimmer Sunbow style style. Even if a lot of the time it's just a necessity because Lamborghini refuses companies splitting the hood down the middle. Unless it's Studio Series Hot Rod for some reason. Weird. There's not a lot of crazy details on shows, save for the shins and chests. The shins at least go pretty hard. They're a smidge more accurate to the original G1 Sideswipe toy than what we had on the Shining version, which actually works better for the size. Allows them to accentuate bigger, simpler details, which is kinda necessary at this scale. They even included his itty-bitty shoulder cannon, though interestingly it's on the left side. Looking back, it seems as if the toon typically depicts it on the left, while the toy and many reinterpretations of G1 put it on the right. Huh, guess you learn something every day. I don't have a lot to complain about with this one. It's a good chibi representation of Shattered Glass Sideswipe. Eventually it'll be a good representation of chibi G1 Sideswipe. The head sculpt is nice, the tooling is cool, the tampos are done really well. Really, there are only two gripes I have. Firstly, no slashed out Autobot symbol. Going with the G1 head, sure, but come on, it'd literally be a tampograph fix. Don't even have to mold it in, not that hard. And second, again, the turquoise is way too dull. Just like Shattered Glass Ratchet, it's a lot more muted than I would have liked. I guess Blokees is just allergic to minty fresh. Maybe should try some Sensodyne at some point. Next up, we have this bot that looks like they simp for Fortress Maximus or something. Interestingly, this one's one of the more simpler affairs, yet it manages to convey a lot more. Because of the reasonably massive wingspan reallocating the tampograph budgets, a lot of the main body goes without standard coloration. It's just the base level plastic, that's it. Interestingly though, it kinda works. Thundercracker has always been a pretty easy Seeker deco to get right. Usually if there's a problem with Starscream's deco, it gets fixed on the Thundercracker version. Hell, if you count the Buzzworthy box set Seeker as a stand-in for Thundercracker, he technically becomes the one version of the Earthrise mold I genuinely like. And I mean, people already use Hotlink as a stand-in for Skywarp, so stranger things have happened. The torso is nice and compressed, like the full-size version, but way tighter. The legs also have some simple but effective blocking on them. Would look infinitely better with tampagraphs, but like, can't really do that. Really, the only part I take issue with is the head. It's not bad on its own, it's got some really cool helmet stylings and conveys his hesitancy quite well. It's just, damn, those eyes look dead. They're using an insert, so really they should be able to choose whatever shade they want. Maybe I'll give these a paint later down the line if I can get over my laziness. But other than that, solid Thundercracker, probably by virtue of being a Thundercracker, but still, solid. After that, it's the unwilling torso of Devastator. Prowl is always one I forget is actually in this lineup, and he's alright. At least is more visually appealing than the larger version, with a reasonably proportioned head and more realized backpack section. I love the paint and wheels on these door wings, but really I think my favorite bit is actually the torso. It's both sculpted and tampographed very well, with the most adorable little Autobot symbol imaginable. Capped off with some wonderful leg detailing, he's just a nice figure to include in this lineup. Not a lot to say about him, other than the fact I'm happy he's included. He makes sense, unlike the next two. What the f*** are these? You've got Clear Ironhide and Goldfire Bumblebee? Not even Goldbug, there's not even any head details. This isn't even a chase version, it's just something they made right off the bat. Why would they do this? So they can sell a normal Bumblebee in a later way? Oh. Yeah, that makes sense. Look, I'm not gonna call this bad. It's not, it's done quite well. Not chase figure well, but still pretty well. The unique feet blend in with the existing tooling. The torso is pretty nice with its tiny extra window, and the head sculpt is as adorable as the rest. But by the same token, it does feel a little bit stingy saving the proper one for later. With Sideswipe, at least it was a cooler extra deco, but with this it just feels like a bait and switch. Nowhere near as much as Ironhide, mind you, though a lot of that is personal. I'ma be real with you, I have never liked entirely clear decos. Beyond the potential breakage issues later down the line and the fact they don't particularly make any sense as you'd see all the mechanical detail below, they just look ugly. They look less like robots and more like pieces of candy. Cheap and disposable. Clear plastic in the right places looks fantastic, and I don't want them to stop that. But this is too much. Still, it does annoy me that this is okay, but somehow this isn't. Come on, have some consistency. Regardless, as far as clear decos go, this one is actually done pretty well. Everything is clear instead of just select parts. And the plastic almost seems to glow in the right circumstances. It's almost neon in its resplendence. Even the torso looks pretty good, bringing a similar vibe to Prowl with its squishiness. But by the same token, I still think this just looks stupid. I don't think I can criticize it for being bad in any way. It's categorically fine. It's just diametrically opposed to my own collecting sensibilities. I can criticize him for being first before standard Ironhide, just like Bumblebee. These two are basically pulling a Siege to Earthrise switcheroo, only it's over 2 waves. I don't know, I don't really find that cool. As far as the robot lineup goes, I suppose this is a solid enough start. Sure, there are a few extra things here and there that personally I'd swap out for some more standard releases, but marketing wise I see why they did what they did. If this is all they'd released, I'd honestly be cool with it. Except it wasn't. While the vast majority of the Defender wave constitutes standard robots, the rest is actually vehicle modes. Now, in theory, this would be quite lovely. Having small versions of Transformer vehicles is a really lovely idea. The problem is, I don't think they did these particularly well. Really, the one exception would be Thundercracker, who's nice and solid with some decent paintwork. A lot of that comes down to the fact he's basically a flat surface, so it's very easy to get this done right, but still is very nice. I really like how they've interpreted the toon-accurate squares as more techie details, and the wings are lovely and crisp. Honestly, the retro reissues could learn a thing or two from these with their paints. I also love how they've sculpted the underside of the bottom to look like the robot kibble. It's immensely funny. So yeah, overall, rather nice jets, but like, that's the only nice vehicle of the bunch. Prime? The paint is nice, and having the trailer drone at the back is neat. It's kinda hilarious to have him ride himself, and the orange paint is done very well. But at the same time, he's really cheap. The plastic feels super flimsy, and he feels insanely hollow. Compared to the denseness of Thundercracker, it just doesn't cut it. Bumblebee is even worse, even cheaper and even hollower. But now with the added bonuses of a gun that looks super out of place and clear plastic that washes out all of the detail, at least Ironhide made the clear plastic work, even if it wasn't my thing. Bumblebee is just blech. And I mean, cool that they're making use of the same wheels to save costs, but the wheels are kinda shit. On a transformable figure, you can sort of forgive that. But here, it's like, come on. That's the one thing a vehicle mode that doesn't transform is supposed to do. Really, the only thing it's got going for me is the gun being usable as a cannon on the regular sized bots. But is that really worth sacrificing the entire top of the alt mode? Why not just make it plug in normally on a port or something, instead of this bulbous ass ball sockets? Fortunately, the vehicles don't make up the majority of the sets, but I still feel like they could have had a lot more tender love and care put in. Like, if the main members can feel dense and include extensive parts counts, why not these? Did they cut back so they could give more parts to the other fellows? Honestly, hard to say, but I just feel these haven't quite hit their stride. And that basically gives us 4 members that are either compromised or questionable, which is essentially a third of the whole set. Not gonna lie, it puts a sour taste in my mouth. The rest of the set is proving promising, but it feels like it came at the cost of a good chunk of it. It's really souring my enjoyment. But perhaps it can be redeemed with the last 2 members. The real draw of this set, for many, is the Constructicons. And it's not just having chibified versions of the robot designs. Now, the excavator mode isn't actually anything special. The deco is nice, the core articulation is neat, and I love that they included the toy-accurate drill on the side. But beyond that, it's a box on some purple treads with minimal scoop action. Not much to get excited for. However, take a closer look at the bottom. That's a shoulder joint. And an elbow joint. I see what they're doing. This is gonna be really nice. Oh. Yeah, this video's been in production for so long that they basically announced it, and I'm not feeling it. Yeah, I don't know, it sort of looks like TFC Hercules from back in the day, but without the benefit of actually transforming, which would excuse its proportional oddities. It's awesome the shoulders use the toy-style treads, but they still look super jank, and I don't know, something about the arms just bugs me. And all of this without the bombshell that you can't actually buy the pack that turns it into Devastator in the first place. Well, kinda. You can still import it from overseas, it's just not really sold in America and some other territories. Australia, I'm not really sure, but at this point, I'm just kind of over it. Now, to be fair, they had a very good reason. They actually explained that the copyright holder wouldn't allow them to, the copyright holder obviously being Hasbro. So yeah, if they are to be believed, and I do believe they are, it is outside of their control. It's not like that stupid Masterpiece Coronation gear that was geo-blocked for no apparent reason. This at least was something that was planned, and then was blocked halfway through. But yeah, given all the difficulties potentially importing the Devastator stuff, at this point, I'm just kind of like, why? I don't really think I want to go to that much effort for it, especially when, again, SS86 Devastator is literally right around the corner. But if you really want to assemble Devastator without having to go through all the trouble, highly recommend watching Bot Orange's short, which has a really cool workaround. Also, sorry that I sound like complete and utter shit. I've got a cold and I tried waiting until it passed before I recorded this last section here, because when I recorded this video initially, the whole Devastator debacle wasn't even a thing yet. But no matter how much I wait, I just cannot seem to shake this, and it's really frustrating. So you gotta put up with me sounding like shit. Sorry about that. So if I'm not vibing with the Devastator, that means these two have to basically work on their own merits. And well, they're okay, but not anything crazy. The Excavator I've already gone over, but the robot, he just lacks the crispness of the others. While I adore the colors, those aren't particularly anything new. And the torso tampos and eye paint are just kind of bland. It's just a big sticker and a washed out visor. Yes, red paint difficulty and all that, but the others were already able to do this well. Just feels like a letdown, though I'm kind of glad I'm freed from needing to complete another set of Constructicons. I'm already going after both 86 and the standard Blokees ones. Dr. Wu is on the way eventually, and Blokees basically occupies the same space as DX9 Hulky anyway. Yeah, the older I get and the more I collect, the more I kind of vibe with with Hulky. Maybe you'll get a third opinion someday down the track. But after we do all that, pretty much half the set ends up in disappointment. Bar vehicle mode Bumblebee, I don't think I could call any of this bad, but it's just like, where's the magic from the full-size version? Where's the pizzazz? Where's the lamb sauce? Well, turns out it just went in another direction. The bigger stuff. If Classics class is the Blokees equivalent of high-grade Gunpla, then Action Edition is the equivalent of Master Grade. This behemoth really fills out his price range in a very good way. All chunky and resplendent. Not in build quality, he still very much feels like a model kit, but at the very least in his proportions. Megatron basically looks like he stepped right out of Dreamwave, with the exception of the slightly bigger head. Said head sculpt is absolutely divine, with the killer stretched bucket head, sharp shit-eating expression, and crisp black eyebrows. The whole thing is actually painted too. In fact, most of the plastic is either a matte or metallic finish, with the exception of the reds and blacks. All this for the low price of a Voyager. What is Gundam doing at this point? You can even light that up with a magnetic activation key, which is a way better way of lighting things up than the old shaky method. I do understand the mechanism would be way more expensive though, but it's still great to see here. The torso is monolithic, as all G1 Megatrons should be. Maybe the midriff is a little too round for my tastes, but it very much makes up for it with the killer transparent accents. None of these are painted either, it's all different shades. That's lovely attention to detail. And swing around the back and you can see the best thing I love to see on Megatrons, red zones. It's always been my favorite color feature of the G1 toy, and seeing it here in such strength is lovely. It really helps bring stuff like the arms to life. Sure, said arms are pretty cool on their own, all chunky and beefy, but with the subtle red, it really gives them that power factor. The legs even more so. Already they're awesome with their Dreamwave-esque wideness, but couple that with the interiors and they become some of the best G1 Megatron legs I've seen. Only had to sacrifice the transformation to get there, but still, really nice. The fusion cannon is also delightful, nice and chunky with an appropriate balance in size. It's not too small so it feels iffy, but it's not so massive that it looks out of place. It even has its own extra feature where pulling it back opens it up. It's not the most seamless as it's not always aligned, and I'm not sure I'm that much of a fan of it, but it's still a nice feature to have, and it takes nothing away from the rest of the figure. That's sort of how I feel about the other accessories too. You've got the sword with a removable blade, the gun, the flail, replacement pieces for the forearms, an alternate head sculpt, Kremzik for some reason, reflector so you can recreate that one comic book reference to The Killing Joke.
It was just sex, for God's sake. Doesn't have to mean anything.
They're all fine, except for Laserbeak, which is so close to being good, but misses the paint on the eyes, so he just looks dead. I think it would have been better to use the clear yellow plastic on the eyes instead of Kremzik. But hey, it's just an accessory at the end of the day, not much lost. Hypothetically, this massive accessory count could be a bit annoying. I mean, it was so on the Magic Square version, but that was for a specific reason. With Ragnar, the big issue was they saddled him with so much extra plastic without really giving the base figure any TLC. Here, given he's a model kit and exceptionally well crafted, it's not really that big of an issue. I mean, he doesn't particularly have to transform, just primarily focused on the build quality and articulation, both of which are really good for a model kit. There's a lot of careful focus on parts such as the shoulders, the knees, and the neck. They made it so that getting this guy into a dynamic pose is piss easy. Even the fingers are really sturdy, which for a model kit is quite surprising. Funny how something you assemble yourself runs circles around figures like Commander of Stars. If I had any gripes with the posing, really it would be the limit of the ab crunch, which, to be honest, very few model kits have deep ab crunches anyway, and the hip skirts. These mostly work well range-wise, but they keep popping off, especially the ones on the sides. Other than that, the panels on the side opening is a bit weird. Doesn't seem to accomplish much as there's virtually nothing in there, not even any crazy mechanical detail. If it was something like Sentinel Prime with hidden weapons, sure, but this just doesn't do anything at all. But hey, at least it doesn't interfere with the core experience, that being a wonderfully crafted, non-transforming Megatron. He's full of posing, options, and immaculate style. If you're looking for a nice display piece and don't want to break the bank, you can't really go wrong. They even included a throne for him, which doubles as storage for all the accessories. Quite lovely, though isn't this supposed to be Starscream's? And wasn't Megatron already Galvatron when he reached this point? And finally, there's also a stand. It's proprietary, but it works really well. Honestly, I really just wish they'd make this functional on all Transformers, because I kinda need a stand for my own stuff. Never forgive. Never forget. But regardless, it's a lovely extension of the traditional classic class stylings. It does feel like it's about as far as they can go before they need to rethink things, but for where they are, it's really good. Of course, as good as this is, sometimes you just can't beat the classics.
How do you do, fellow kids?
You know, for all the insanity they put into the larger Megatron, honestly, I think Classics class is really where they do their best work. After all the ups and downs of this frankly bloated script, this really reminded me why I love this company so much. I think it might be the perfect Blokees release. Seriously, this is just amazing. Everything great about the previous one figures, minus Sentinel of course, is brought back to the limelight in full force. The head sculpt is borderline perfect, excellently capturing Steve Buscemi's snark. Still kinda would have preferred Tom Kenny, but you all know how those Hollywood animated films gotta be. If I had to complain about one thing with it, I kinda wish the orange was darker as he looks a bit dead-eyed, but it's still damn good. The torso below is practically perfect, layered exceptionally in ways that blow the others out of the water. Combining the metallic finish with tons of frame pieces, he ends up being both visually stunning and picture perfect. The nose cone even rotates to get out of the way of the waist swivel. Excellent work. Modern Transformers articulation could learn a thing or two, though I do get budgeting limitations. In fact, the articulation overall is stellar. Not on the level of Megatron before him, but honestly, it really doesn't need to be. I love how they sort of re-engineer the shoulder ball joints to act more as universals, giving him plenty of range. Combined with his slender physique, he ends up being really dynamic. It's very hard to have him not look awesome in any pose. With the super slender and wonderfully layered legs, he's schmoving in any way you put him. Also, nice touch with the thrusters sort of molded on the back. Pretty neat. Now, as for his functionality, he's not got a lot to him. The wings open, and that's about it. I think it's a cool feature, and would love to see it on the eventual Studio Series version. Not that that's ever going to happen, sadly. The wings, not the existence of the figure. You think Hasbro is passing up an opportunity for 5 billion redecos? But that's about it. Not even the chest lights up, though given the complicated build system, I don't see that as an issue. It's fine, honestly. And hey, if you want more functionality, you have... Wait, they could have done proper alt modes without being this whole time? What the f***? Yes, for some bizarre reason, he comes with an alternate mode of Megatron as an accessory. I don't know why he has this, none of the others from this wave do, but somehow he does. And you know what? I do f*** with this. It's solidly built, well layered, well painted, and actually has decent functionality that doesn't come at the cost of either figure within the box. It's small, compact, and stays in its lane. It doesn't actively make the entire wave worse by its conclusion, and for that, I'm grateful. But as for the set on the whole, damn, this is good. I mean, sure, maybe the null rays could be bigger, but I'm not going to begrudge accuracy just because it's not up my alley. In terms of robot mode representation, Blokees honestly has the lineup done best. Will this be my definitive Transformers 1 Starscream? I'm not sure. I was sure I was sentineled out with the Deluxe and Classics versions last time, but then I impulse bought the Voyager and it turned out to be amazing, so who knows? It still does make me sad that Studio Series never gave these the proper decos they deserved. I'll honestly never understand why Studio Series Transformers 1 figures didn't go for the full metallic look that the movie so beautifully depicted. Like, in the movie, that was honestly the whole thing. Transforming bots were shiny, they were resplendent, which heavily contrasted with the regular bots, as it damn well should. And for the regular deluxes, it makes sense. These are supposed to be cheaper, so not having that is fine. In practice, Australia charged $40 for both, but the point still stands. But then you get to the full-size releases, and none of them have any metallic elements to them. Prime got close with his pearlescent parts, but then everyone complained they look rusty, and now, probably just coincidentally, they're all plain plastic. Is it a budgeting thing? I'd be willing to believe that, if Studio Series wasn't known for doing a heavy amount of metallic figures to push screen accuracy. Is the only reason they did a bunch this way already because they were forced to by the car companies? And now that it's not a requirement, who cares, I guess? All this does is open the door for Takara to swoop in later down the line with a premium finish style special release, which I'm not going to call or anything, but like, it's easy money once there's enough molds under their belts. I just wish they'd given these decos the tender love and care they deserve. The molds already range from decent to fantastic. All they need is some good old shine to make them truly, well, shine. But with that, and with the way Sentinel turned out, I'm honestly not sure what'll happen going forward. Look, I'll be honest, Starscream is fantastic, but it's fantastic in ways I've already discussed many times before. Blokees does these figures really well, and I love that Starscream specifically has reignited a passion within me. But it is difficult to talk about him for that reason. He's great, but he is also great in the same way those are before him. You know exactly what you're getting into when you see him, and there's sort of something nice about that. He doesn't under or overwhelm you, he just whelms you, but that whelming is of impeccable quality. Look, this video has taken so long to get through that I've basically changed my entire thesis midway. Writer's block and family members literally dying has made me push this back and back, and it's just time to put this to rest. Is Blokees in a position to continue on both fantastic quality level and maintain sustainability and execution of ideas? Yes. Yes, it is. Unlike Creo or Mighty Mugs or God forbid Red, they actually tap into what fans want, do them to a high quality, and keep to a price range well below. Not everything seems to be shaping up exceptionally, but enough seems to be that they can keep their finger on the pulse. Not every figure they put out is a winner, some of them are below par for sure, but they definitely strike out more than they fail, and when they go hard, they really go hard. But that puts the next question. where does my own coverage go from here? Well, you might have noticed recently that until April, I was kind of on a semi-hiatus. I'll be candid, this likely means no more sponsorship opportunities. And that makes sense, real life tragedies or no, I didn't deliver this in a timely manner. I broke the rules of engagement, and for that, I will live with the consequences. But even if the future brings me a renegotiation on the agreement, I don't think it'll be the same. I've honestly said most of what I have to say on the company. I still love what they produce, and I will continue to do so. But full reviews need extensive writing. Perhaps I'll just do it bit by bit as I go throughout the year, a la Skybound shorts, which coincidentally are still on hiatus for similar reasons. Or maybe I'll just do them as sponsored showcases, as those are easy enough. I'm not sure, but I do know one thing. Sometimes you can have too much of a good thing, and at this point, I'm ready to move on to other creative projects. Thank you, Blokees. I'm sorry for taking so long, and I'm not going anywhere really, but there's other topics out there that require my attention. Other fandom conversations that make up the public consciousness. Other contexts that I can pull apart and peek inside. So, whether that's it or not, till next time!